Chapter 15-17. When the beam of light arrived, Xuehao held the mirror in front of him with both hands. The incomparably ferocious light beam bombarded the surface of the mirror, but there was no sound. The smooth surface of the mirror actually swallowed the light beam completely. Lu Yi controlled Spectre Ship to attack several beams of light, but they were all devoured by the strange mirror soul artifact. He immediately understood that this mirror was of extremely high quality. Under the suppression of Xuehao's divine attribute, his soul avatar was only at the early stage of Yu Yao's soul avatar. However, this mirror soul artifact had been nourished in his divine sea for countless years. Even with Spectre Ship's might, Lu Yi could not do anything to it. He was not in a hurry. After all, in this battle of offense and defense, he held the absolute initiative and advantage. Although the mirror soul artifact was good, it still had a limit. It could not be maintained indefinitely. Xuehao used the mirror soul artifact to temporarily block Spectre Ship's attacks, but he knew that this was not a long-term solution. Thus, he was looking for an opportunity to counterattack. The waves in the divine sea churned. Pillars of water constantly rose from the sea of blood. They were like blood dragons that bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced on Spectre Ship. However, Spectre Ship was both offensive and defensive. Once the ship's protective array was activated, even though there were many blood dragons, they could not break through the array. They could not do anything to Spectre Ship for a while. The situation was in a deadlock. Lu Yi could not do anything to Xuehao, and Xuehao could not do anything to Lu Yi. Li Shang had been standing quietly beside Lu Yi, but at this moment he suddenly said, "I'll help you." As he spoke, his figure flickered. Like a wisp of smoke, he fused into Spectre Ship. In the next moment, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows in surprise. He could clearly feel that as Li Shang fused into Spectre Ship, the already powerful might of Spectre Ship became even more ferocious. Li Shang had this ability? He knew that the soul race's soul possession secret technique was not limited to the physical body of living beings. Some soul race members could even attach their souls to the weapons of cultivators, increasing the weapon's lethality. However, Spectre Ship was not a weapon. Strictly speaking, it was a soul artifact. Lu Yi did not know that the soul race could attach their souls to soul artifacts. However, when he thought about it, it was not strange. The soul race was named after the soul. Soul artifacts required soul energy to activate. He had originally planned to slowly wear down the power of Xuehao's mirror soul artifact, but with Li Shang's assistance, he immediately increased the intensity of his attacks. The beam of light from the ghost ship became brighter and thicker. The blood dragons along the way could not withstand a single blow and exploded one after another. Beam after beam of light shot into the mirror soul artifact, causing Xuehao's expression to change drastically. He could clearly feel that this soul artifact that had accompanied him for so many years was rapidly reaching its limit. However, he could not allow the pillars of light to wreak havoc in his divine sense sea. Instead, he had to take the initiative to absorb every single pillar of light into the mirror. He knew that the consequences would be terrible, but he had no choice but to do so. This was simply being dismembered, causing his heart to be filled with torment. In his anger, he could only strengthen his attack on the Spectre Ship, frantically urging the power of his deity ocean. The sea of blood boiled even more. However, the ghost ship had a defensive array. Although Xuehao's strength was much stronger than Lu Ye's, he still couldn't break through the defensive array and cause any damage to Lu Ye's soul avatar. A moment later, under Xuehao's despairing gaze, cracks began to appear on the mirror soul artifact in his hand. A bright light blossomed from those cracks, and an extremely terrifying aura began to fill the air. Xuehao's expression became one of terror, but it quickly turned into determination. He used the mirror that was about to shatter as a shield in front of him and rapidly charged in the direction of the ghost ship, shouting, "Let's die together." Lu Yi had already sensed that something was wrong the moment the mirror cracked. This mirror soul artifact had devoured too many of the ghost ship's attacks. That devouring didn't seem to be eliminating them, but rather temporarily storing them inside the mirror. Now that the mirror was about to shatter, the many attacks stored inside might erupt all at once. Let alone Xuehao, even the ghost ship itself might not be able to withstand such a ferocious attack. Now that he saw Xuehao charge over with the mirror, he immediately understood that he had guessed correctly. This vampire Yu Yao actually wanted to drag him down with her. "Li Shang, run!" Lu Yi shouted. Although he wanted to steer the ghost ship away from Xuehao's divine sea, under Xuehao's intentional blockade, the vast divine sea wasn't a place he could leave as he pleased. Now he could only rely on Li Shang's ability. As soon as Lu Yi finished speaking, Li Shang reappeared. He grabbed Lu Ye's hand and jumped up. With this jump, it was as if he had jumped into the underworld. Out of the corner of his eye, Lu Ye saw a violent explosion of light, as if a great sun had exploded. Shui Hao roared in indignation, and then a terrifying power swept out in all directions. Even the ghost ship, which was protected by a protective array, was torn to pieces by this power. Lu Ye's head hurt and he couldn't help but groan. Then he felt his entire body hurt, especially his chest. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already appeared in the previous battlefield. Shui Hao was right in front of him. He still had one of his hands extended out and stuck it into his chest. That large hand was still holding onto his heart, maintaining the posture he had before the soul battle. But at this moment Shui Hao no longer had any signs of life. His wide eyes were empty and lifeless. His soul avatar had already been shattered. Although his physical body was intact, it would be difficult for him to survive. Lu Ye raised the mountain saber in his hand and slashed out diagonally. Saber light flashed. Having lost his vitality, Shui Hao's fleshly body was no longer as strong. The arm that had pierced into Lu Ye's chest was cut off. Lu Ye staggered back a few steps and leaned against the soft body. It was Li Shang who supported him. Using the last of his strength, Lu Ye raised his hand and sent out a fierce flame, burning Shui Hao's corpse. Only then did he say to Li Shang, "Let's go." He didn't know how many Yu Yao of the blood race had come chasing after him. Although it seemed like there was only Shui Hao at the moment, who knew if there might be more behind him. Not only was he heavily injured, but his physical body was also weak. Even the power of his soul had been greatly depleted. If more Yu Yao attacked, he would have to use the red talisman. Li Shang reached out and grabbed the blood crystal left behind by Shui Hao. Only then did he bring Lu Ye in the direction of the spore cloud. Along the way she said, "That Yu Yao of the blood race's cultivation is far superior to yours and mine. Thus, I had to wait until the moment he relaxed his guard before I could activate the soul battle." She was undoubtedly explaining to Lu Ye why she hadn't activated the soul battle at the beginning. She had been waiting for an opportunity all this time. When Shui Hao had stabbed his hand into Lu Ye's chest and thought that the battle was over, that would be the moment he relaxed his guard. Lu Ye nodded silently. He raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He said softly, "Thank you." This time it was all thanks to Li Shang. If she hadn't activated the soul battle, he would have had to use the red talisman to have a chance of dealing with that Yu Yao of the blood race. However, that was only a chance. If the red talisman hadn't been able to deal with Shui Hao, then he wouldn't have had a good ending. In the soul battle he had a huge advantage with the specter ship. This thing was both offensive and defensive. Even those whose spiritual power was stronger than his wouldn't be able to take advantage of it. This was evident from Shui Hao's fate. Shui Hao had been suppressed by the holy attribute, but he had still been able to unleash the power of Yu Yao's early stage. In the end, his soul had still been scattered. Ever since he had obtained the specter ship, Lu Ye had always treated it as the greatest barrier to protect his spirit sea. This was because he couldn't take the initiative to attack and could only rely on the specter ship to defend himself. However, if he had Li Shang's ability, then in the future if he encountered someone stronger than him, he would also be able to activate the soul battle and defeat them with his spiritual power. After traveling for a short while, he saw a few tall figures approaching from afar. It was Mu He, Black Umbrella and the others. They had left on the spore cloud, but they were still worried about Lu Ye. After some discussion, they decided to return and lend Lu Ye a hand. After all, this was a matter between the wood spirit race and the spore race. They couldn't just stand by and watch. When the two sides met up and saw Lu Ye's condition, Mu He and Black Umbrella were shocked. However, they were even more shocked when they learned that Yu Yao of the blood race had been killed. That was a Yu Yao. Although Mu He and Black Umbrella did not know the exact cultivation level of the other party, she should be at least in the middle stage of the Yu Yao realm. She was actually killed in such a short time. What kind of earth-shattering strength did the two constellations sent by the reincarnation tree have? After returning to the spore cloud, the two constellations continued to move forward. Lu Ye had taken the initiative to land in front of the spore cloud. One reason was to guide the two races, and two was to guard against any dangers ahead so that he could deal with them in a timely manner. However, this time Mu He and Black Umbrella placed him in the center of the spore cloud. They let him stay with a group of newly born wood spirits and spore race children. This was undoubtedly the safest place in the spore cloud. Lu Ye didn't refuse. In his current condition he really couldn't fight anyone. Li Shang stood guard beside him. He sat cross-legged, recovering his physical body while investigating his divine sea. Neither the ghost ship nor the ferocious attacks from the ghost ship appeared out of thin air. They originated from Lu Ye's own spiritual energy. After the previous battle, he had exhausted a great deal of his spiritual energy. The ghost ship's imprint was still there, so even though Xuehao's mirror shattered and the ghost ship in his divine sea was also destroyed, Lu Yi could condense a new ghost ship at any time as long as the imprint was there. The destroyed specter ship was merely a manifestation of the power of Lu Ye's soul. Physical injuries could be recovered by swallowing spirit pills. Moreover, Lu Yi was now at the late-stage constellation realm and cultivated the blood race's secret arts. It wasn't difficult for him to recover, but it would take some time. Replenishing spiritual energy wasn't so convenient, and if his spiritual energy wasn't abundant enough, even if his physical body recovered, he would still be in a state of mental exhaustion. He had a few spirit pills on him that could recover spiritual energy. He had bought them from the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce as backup, but the effects weren't too good. End of chapter. Chapter 15-18. Throughout the starry sky there were many kinds of spirit pills that could restore the physical body, but there were not many that could restore the soul, and they were many times more expensive. The spirit pills Lu Yi bought from the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce were the best, but the effect was not very good. Thinking about it, Yang Kai took out a handful of seaweed from his storage ring and chewed it. Unexpectedly, Li Shang, who had been guarding him, was shocked when he saw the seaweed again. Spirit refining grass? Lu Yi looked at him and asked with some surprise, "You recognize it?" This seaweed was something he brought back from the Constellation Hall. At that time, the entire Constellation Hall was wrapped in this kind of seaweed, making it look like it had grown hair. It took him a few months to clean up the seaweed, so one could imagine how much of it there was. He kept these seaweeds because he felt that they should be good stuff, especially when it came to recovering the power of the divine soul. However, he never figured out what this seaweed was. "Can I see it?" Li Shang asked. "What's there to not see?" Lu Yi grabbed another handful of seaweed and handed it to Li Shang. Li Shang took it and carefully examined it, a strange expression appearing on his face. "It looks like spirit refining grass, but it's a bit different from the spirit refining grass I know. Where did you get this?" "I picked it up," Lu Yi said casually. This could also be considered as picking it up. Li Shang was a little speechless. To pick up spirit refining grass so casually, this luck was really amazing. "Tell me about it," Lu Yi said. He was quite interested in this seaweed because it could restore soul power, which was undoubtedly very valuable, especially since he had a huge amount of it on hand. However, the source of this thing was not easy to explain, and Lu Yi did not lack spirit jades, so he had never exposed it. Otherwise he would have already exchanged it for spirit jades. "The soul refining grass is a specialty of my hometown, but even in my hometown, it is an extremely precious spirit grass. It is of great use to our soul race. Its name refers to its effect. It can be used to refine the soul. Although its effect is not second to none, it is the safest and has the least hidden dangers. This thing looks like the soul refining grass, but it seems to be a little different," Li Shang said with a puzzled expression. Lu Ye's heart moved. Maybe it's because it grew in a different environment, so it looks different? However, this thing is indeed beneficial to the soul. A normal environment might not have much effect on the spirit refining grass, but the special environment under the Wanxiang Sea was hard to say. "That's possible." Li Shang nodded, agreeing with Lu Ye's statement, "but whether it's true or not, I'll have to try to find out." Hearing this, Lu Yi took out a large pile of seaweed and gave it to her. Li Shang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. So many? Was it a lot? Lu Yi thought to himself that the seaweed he had stored in the Constellation Hall had already piled up into a mountain. What was this little bit to him? "Isn't this a specialty from your hometown? Don't you have many?" Lu Yi asked. Li Shang looked at him with a complicated expression. "Although the spirit refining grass is a specialty of our hometown, each one of them is extremely rare. Don't chew it, it's not edible." Lu Yi stopped chewing. "If it's not edible, how do I use it?" He had always been eating like this. Previously, in order to cultivate the 10,000 waves of the tidal sea, he would eat a bit of seaweed every time. "Wait a moment, let me see if this is the spirit refining grass," Li Shang said as she sat down beside him and very carefully pulled out a strand of seaweed from the pile Lu Yi gave her and held it in the palm of her hand. Lu Yi felt her spiritual energy begin to surge and was surprised to see the seaweed in her palm bloom with a faint light. From the seaweed, an extremely strange power began to surge. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes couldn't help twitching as he silently spat out the spirit refining grass he had been chewing in his mouth. After a while, Li Shang opened her eyes overflowing with joy. This is the spirit refining grass, but it looks a little different from the spirit refining grass produced in my hometown. Where did you find it? Li Shang asked, but as soon as she spoke, she realized that it was inappropriate to ask such a question. Lu Yi didn't care and casually said, I accidentally found it in a certain world domain, but it's gone now. Does this thing need to be refined with spiritual energy? He had tried to refine it with his spiritual energy before, but it was useless, so he swallowed it. In any case, with the innate skill tree, he didn't have to worry about being poisoned to death. As a result, he found that swallowing it had an effect on restoring spiritual energy, so he kept eating it, but he didn't expect that he was going in the wrong direction. Yes, you need to use spiritual energy to refine it. This is the spirit grass used to temper the soul. It's too wasteful for you to chew and swallow it like that. Lu Yi tried to refine the seaweed according to Li Shang's method, and after a while, he looked happy because he found that the effect of this seaweed was much greater than if he swallowed it directly. Swallowing it directly could only restore a little of his spiritual energy, but by using spiritual energy to refine it, not only could he restore more spiritual energy, but it could also temper his spiritual energy. In a short time he couldn't see much of the effect, but in the long run, his spiritual energy would become extremely tough and powerful. It turned out that he was wrong. Lu Yi thought of the spirit refining grass he had swallowed before and couldn't help feeling a little distressed. Fortunately, he had a huge amount of spirit refining grass in his hands, so the previous consumption was almost negligible. He just didn't know if this thing could be used in alchemy. If it could, then the effect it could play would be even greater. While Lu Yi was deep in thought, Li Shang pushed the pile of spirit refining grass in front of her back. Lu Yi looked up at her. Li Shang said, Spirit refining grass is extremely precious. Now that your spiritual energy has been damaged, you can use it to recover. Lu Yi smiled and pushed the spirit refining grass back. Take it, consider it a thank you gift from me. I still have some of this, it's enough. Li Shang pursed her red lips and hesitated. If it were anything else she naturally wouldn't care. There were too many treasures in the starry sky that were useless to the soul race, but spirit refining grass was different. This was exactly what the soul race needed. With this pile of spirit refining grass, she even saw hope of advancing to Yu Yao. Even she couldn't remain indifferent. However, she still felt that it was necessary to remind Lu Yi, do you know how much a stalk of spirit refining grass is worth? How much? Lu Yi asked. At least 5,000 spirit jades. Lu Yi was stunned. He knew that spirit refining grass was definitely valuable, but he didn't expect it to be so valuable. If one stalk was worth 5,000, then how much was the spirit refining grass in the Constellation Hall worth? Not to mention the spirit refining grass in the Constellation Hall, just the ones he gave to Li Shang were worth at least 1,000,000 spirit jades. While Lu Yi was calculating his wealth, Li Shang thought he finally realized the value of the spirit refining grass and was reluctant to give it away, so she pushed the pile of spirit refining grass back to him. Lu Yi finally regained his senses. I told you to take it, so take it. If we meet any enemies later, I'll need your help. Li Shang looked into his eyes and didn't see any reluctance. For a moment she couldn't figure out what kind of person Lu Yi was, giving away something worth 1,000,000 spirit jades just like that. Moreover, spirit refining grass wasn't something that could be bought with spirit jades. In the end she accepted it and softly said, thank you. Lu Yi continued to refine the spirit refining grass to recover his spiritual energy. The more he refined, the more Lu Yi could feel the miraculous effects of this grass. It really could temper his soul. Li Shang didn't refine the spirit refining grass and continued to stand guard by his side. Black Umbrella and Mu He came to visit Lu Yi from time to see how his injuries were recovering. The wood spirits and spore race children seemed to have learned about Lu Yi and Li Shang's kindness from their elders, and from time to time, some children would run over to give them a few small mushrooms. These mushrooms were of various colors, and all of them had extraordinary healing properties. Moreover, they were sweet and delicious. Lu Ye's injuries improved day by day, and his soul energy also became abundant. No more blood tribe masters came after him, so it seemed that Xuehao was acting alone. Thinking about it, why would a late-stage moon jade need the help of others? Xuehao must have thought that he could easily take down Lu Yi with his own strength, but he didn't expect to fail miserably, shattering his soul and extinguishing his vitality. The rest of the journey was relatively peaceful. 3 months later, a strange scene appeared in the starry sky. It was a giant tree that was emitting fluorescent light. It stood in the starry sky out of thin air. The tree was huge and boundless. Its canopy was dense and its roots extended in all directions. It was like a giant dragon entrenched in the starry sky. Stars hung from the tree like fruits, emitting a resplendent light. Whether it was the spore race's wood spirits, Lu Yi or Li Shang, they all stared blankly at this astonishing scene. Although Lu Yi had entered and exited the reincarnation tree twice, he had always directly entered the tree's interior. He had never seen what the tree looked like from the outside. Until now. Such a large tree gave a strong visual impact. Lu Yi had never thought that there would be a tree in this world that could grow to such a size. It could be said that the area covered by this tree was the size of an entire galaxy. The spore cloud slowly approached the area covered by the tree, and the closer it got, the more insignificant it felt. Following the guidance of the reincarnation tree's imprint on the back of his hand, Lu Yi led the spore cloud to a branch of the reincarnation tree. The branch swayed gently, and then a black door opened in front of it. Within the spore cloud, the spore race and wood spirit tribe's constellation masters were bidding farewell to their people. Most of the people of the two races could migrate into the reincarnation tree's tree world and live under its protection, but the reincarnation tree didn't accept cultivators of the constellation realm and above. This was because constellation realm cultivators already had the ability to survive in the starry sky, so the constellation masters of the two races couldn't enter the tree world. Farewells were painful and parting was also unbearable. After a long while, the constellation masters of the two races maintained, and the people of the two races passed through the door in an orderly manner and entered the tree world prepared for them in advance. End of chapter. Chapter 15-19. In front of the reincarnation tree's huge branches, the spore cloud had already disappeared. Only about 100 huge figures stood there. They were the lunar mansions of the wood spirits and the spore race. With Mu He and Black Umbrella in the lead, the two lunar mansions bowed respectfully to Lu Yi and Li Shang. Mu He said, "Thank you my friends for your help in escorting us along the way, allowing us wood spirits and the spore race to migrate safely. We will remember your kindness." Lu Yi returned the bow. "Patriarch, you don't have to worry about it. I was just following Elder Shu's orders." He paused for a moment, then asked curiously, "Where will you go from here?" The wood spirits and the spore race who were below the lunar mansion's realm had been brought into the reincarnation tree world, but the lunar mansions of the wood spirits and the spore race had nowhere to go. Lu Yi did not know what they were planning to do. Mu He said, "We will look for a place where we can survive. When the time comes we will bring our people over." In the universe there were actually many realms that could be inhabited, but most of them did not give birth to powerful beings. If it was a normal race, it would not be difficult to find a suitable realm for them to live in, but the wood spirits and the spore race were special. A realm that was suitable for them to live in was not enough to satisfy their needs, so they had to be well hidden. Otherwise they would be targeted by powerful beings. Of course, if they were lucky enough to find a place where the wood spirits or the spore race lived, they would be able to blend in smoothly. Lu Yi could do nothing about it. He could only wish them good luck. The lunar mansions of the two races left under Mu He and Black Umbrella's lead. Lu Yi turned around and walked into a door behind him with Li Shang. In the same unknown space, Lu Yi and Li Shang appeared at the same time. They saw the reincarnation tree waiting for them. On the tree, the reincarnation tree smiled kindly. "You two have done well this time. Thank you for your hard work." Lu Yi said indifferently, "Elder Shu, you talk to them about the rules but they don't talk to you. What do you want to say?" The reason why the reincarnation tree had summoned Lu Yi to solve the problem in the Blue Jade world was because this was a matter of the constellations. Therefore, even if the reincarnation tree heard the pleas of the wood spirits and the spore race, it could only look for Lu Yi, the only constellation it had. But in the end, Yu Yao from the blood tribe had actually come running over. Moreover, she was a late-stage Yu Yao. If it weren't for Lu Ye's holy aura suppressing her and Li Shang's help, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to keep her red talisman. The reincarnation tree was puzzled. What happened? As for how a late-stage constellation realm cultivator like him had managed to kill a late-stage Yu Yao, there was no need for him to go into detail. The reincarnation tree knew that he possessed a powerful saintly nature that could suppress the blood tribe. After hearing this, the reincarnation tree looked furious. "The blood race's actions have already broken the rules. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation." As he spoke, he suddenly closed his eyes. At the same time, in the various realms occupied by the blood race, the reincarnation tree's clones began to tremble violently. Several years had passed since the last battle of the Divine Sea. These reincarnation tree clones were still sprouting and growing healthily, waiting for the next century to flourish. However, at this moment all of them suddenly withered and died. The blood breeds in charge of guarding the reincarnation tree avatars in various realms noticed this strange scene and hurriedly reported the news. Very soon, blood breeds Yu Yao and even Rizhao came to investigate in front of the reincarnation tree avatars. The reincarnation tree clones continued to tremble, and an inexplicable power fluctuated wildly. Yu Yao and Rizhao, who had come to investigate, quickly figured out the whole story. Their faces were as dark as water as they cursed Shuehao for ruining their race's once-in-a-century opportunity. It would have been fine if the reincarnation tree hadn't intervened in the invasion of the Blue Jade world. The blood race could send out any experts they wanted. The Blue Jade world couldn't resist because it couldn't. However, since the reincarnation tree had intervened, they had to abide by its rules. The blood race was the first to break the rules, and now that the reincarnation tree clones had withered and died, this was clearly the reincarnation tree's punishment. Without the reincarnation tree clones, the blood race would no longer be able to participate in the battle of the Alpha Origin Divine Sea in the future, nor would they be able to obtain any benefits. This was undoubtedly a huge loss for the entire blood race. In the unnamed space, the reincarnation tree told Lu Yi about the punishment for the blood race's various realms, but Lu Yi didn't feel much. He also knew that the reincarnation tree couldn't really do anything to the blood race. It wouldn't go as far as to find Rizhao of the blood race to make an example out of him. This punishment didn't seem painful, but in the long run, it would undoubtedly have a significant impact on the future development of the entire blood race. Those who could stand out in the battle of the Alpha Origin Divine Sea would all have great achievements in the future, and the blood race always occupied a lot of spots. Now that the blood race couldn't participate, it gave the other races an opportunity to reduce the number of experts born in the blood race in the future. Little friend, this matter has been completed. Is there anything you need this old man to do? The reincarnation tree had previously said that if he could complete this mission, he would be able to fulfill one of Lu Ye's requests, which could also be considered a reward. Lu Yi didn't have any other requests. He just wanted to know how to return to the Jade Conch Galaxy from the Wanxiang Galaxy. Others might not know, but for the reincarnation tree, which had clones all over the starry sky, this was definitely not a problem. However, he didn't directly ask how to return to the Jade Conch Galaxy from the Wanxiang Galaxy. Instead, he asked, "Old Shu, if I set off from here and return to my homeland, how long would it take with my current strength?" The reincarnation tree pondered for a moment and said, "With your strength, it would take at least 100 years to set off from here, even with the help of the star boat." 100 years. Although it wasn't as terrifying as he had imagined, it was still a very long time. Lu Yi had only cultivated for a dozen or so years. Then what if I set off from the Wanxiang Galaxy? The reincarnation tree pondered again. 3 to 5 years is enough. Lu Yi was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Then please give me a star chart that can guide me back to my homeland from the Wanxiang Galaxy." "As you wish." The reincarnation tree seemed to have been prepared. As it spoke, its trunk shook, and a ball of light fell from the dense leaves and floated into Lu Ye's hand. The ball of light dissipated, and Lu Yi finally saw what was inside. It was a leaf. It looked inconspicuous, but if he immersed his divine sense in it, he would be able to see a complete star chart. Lu Yi examined it for a moment and found that it was indeed the route from the Wanxiang Galaxy to the 9 states. He hurriedly put it away and bowed, "Thank you, old Shu." He could finally go home. Although there was a clone of the reincarnation tree in the 9 states, and he could ask the reincarnation tree to send him back, returning to the 9 states was not his ultimate goal. He wanted to bring the constellations of the 9 states out, establish a foothold in the Wanxiang Sea, and cultivate to become stronger. Therefore, no matter what, he had to have a route between the 9 states and the Wanxiang Galaxy. Otherwise, it would be meaningless if he returned to the 9 states but not to the Wanxiang Sea. The reincarnation tree said amiably, "You deserve it. Little friend, are you going back to the Wanxiang Sea now? I can send you there." Lu Yi hurriedly said, "Then I will have to trouble you, old Shu." The reincarnation tree smiled, and its branches drooped down and intertwined to form a door. Lu Yi led Li Shang into the door, and the reincarnation tree's voice suddenly rang out, "Little friend, before you advance to Yu Yao, you should try the Yin Yang Great Millstone." After stepping out of the door, Lu Yi found that he had returned to his cave on the Peerless Island. He was curious. He could go directly to the reincarnation tree from here because of the reincarnation tree's mark. He didn't know how the reincarnation tree had sent him back the way he came. However, he couldn't understand the mysterious abilities of a supreme treasure like the reincarnation tree. Although this trip had taken him half a year, he had finally resolved one of his worries. As a reward for completing the reincarnation tree's mission, he had received a star map to return to the 9 states. Moreover, his relationship with Li Shang had also improved greatly. However, before he left, the reincarnation tree had said something that Lu Yi was very concerned about. It had asked him to try the Yin-Yang Great Millstone before he advanced to Yu Yao. The Yin-Yang Great Millstone was a starry sky wonder. When Lu Yi had read about it in the dwarf tribe's Rest Abyss Pavilion, the first thing that was recorded was the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. Thus, even though Lu Yi had never been there, he had a deep impression of this starry sky wonder. According to the dwarf tribe's records, the Yin-Yang Great Millstone was almost a land of death. Any living being that had entered it had all died, including Sunshine. However, an expert like the reincarnation tree obviously wouldn't do something without reason. Lu Yi didn't understand why it wanted him to try the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. Since he couldn't figure it out, Lu Yi didn't think too much about it. He was now focused on the star map. He hurriedly took it out and examined it carefully. After looking at it for a while, he confirmed the route. According to the star map given by the reincarnation tree, he only needed to pass through 2 galaxies to return to the 9 states from the Vientiane galaxy. This was indeed a little shocking. However, this was the star map given by the reincarnation tree, so it couldn't be wrong. When the time came, he would only need to go there personally to find out. However, before that, there were still many things that needed to be prepared. There were still some things that needed to be arranged. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi got up and walked out. He had to share this good news with Tang Jun. The 9-state strength was still a little too weak. A group of newly ascended constellations was really too weak. Thus, if they wanted to enter the Vientiane Sea in the future, they had to unite the strength of the entire Jade Conch galaxy. Only then would they have the qualifications to establish themselves on the Vientiane Sea. This was also what many galaxies that weren't strong enough did. The right thing to do was to unite the people of the entire galaxy. The Qingli Dao world that Tang Jun came from was one of them. The leader of the Jade Conch galaxy, was also one of them. In addition to the 9 states and the 3 realms joining forces, in the entire Vientiane Sea, although their strength wasn't too strong, it wouldn't be too weak either. After leaving his cave, Lu Yi flew into the air. As he looked around, he saw that the Wushuang Island was becoming more and more prosperous. The crisscrossing streets below were filled with cultivators coming and going. It already had the appearance of a large spiritual island. End of chapter. Chapter 1520. The starry sky energy on Matchless Island was very abundant. Lu Yi silently calculated and found that if it continued to develop like this, Matchless Island would probably become a high-class spirit island in just a few months. From a deserted island that no one cared about, to a superior spiritual island, how long had it been? The minor constellation palace was far more effective than he had expected. Moreover, this was because he had controlled the power of the minor constellation palace and had not allowed it to unleash its full power. The power that the minor constellation palace could unleash now was probably not even 10% of its original power. If he had allowed it to unleash its full power, Matchless Island would have become a high-class spirit island long ago. Only the first half of Matchless Island was lively. The second half was still very quiet. That was where the cultivators of Matchless Island lived. The largest sleeping chamber there was Tang Jun's residence. Lu Yi drifted over. Before he entered, he heard Tang Jun's hearty laughter. The old man seemed to be entertaining guests. Lu Yi could feel that Tang Jun's presence was not the only one in the main hall. There were also 2 unfamiliar Yu Yaos. It was not good to disturb them, so Lu Yi could only leave for now. He came to the first half of Matchless Island and wandered around the streets. Soon he sensed a familiar presence from a shop. He walked in slowly and saw several cultivators lingering in the shop, inspecting the goods here. The shop staff was greeting guests. The shopkeeper was sitting behind the counter. When he saw Lu Yi, he quickly stood up and greeted him warmly. "Brotherly, what brings you here? Come in, come in." As he spoke, he pulled Lu Yi into the inner room for a chat. The shopkeeper was none other than Enja. Clearly he had already bought a shop here. Lu Yi said, "I'm just looking around. Brother, and you don't have to be so polite." Enja did not force him and personally accompanied him. "These are some of the specialties of this realm. Brotherly, if you like anything, just take it." Without his relationship with Lu Yi, it would have been impossible for him to obtain a store on the popular and prosperous Matchless Island. But it was precisely because of Lu Ye's words that he was able to obtain this store for his domain with extremely favorable conditions. With this matter alone, he had made a great contribution to the domain he came from. During this period of time, he could call for wind and rain in his domain, and his days were very free and unfettered. Lu Yi strolled around casually. In truth, he was just looking around for novelty because there were many things he had never seen before. And Je personally accompanied him and chatted casually with him. Soon Lu Yi walked out of the shop. And Je said, "Brother Li, let's skip the pleasantries. If you need dragon breath crystals in the future, I'll give you the cheapest price." Lu Yi nodded. "Thank you very much, brother, and I'll leave you to it. I'll visit you again when I'm free." After bidding farewell to Nje, Lu Yi continued to stroll around. Thanks to Chu Xin's various plans, although the Peerless Island was now very popular, everything seemed to be in order. Moreover, no one caused trouble here. After all, the interests of the Peerless Island involved too many forces, and there was no lack of top forces among them. Therefore, even if the Peerless Island itself was not very strong, no one dared to cause trouble here. Cultivators who could cultivate to the constellation realm were all smooth and slick people. Lu Yi wanted to see if the woman who refined pills had come here to open a shop, but after looking around he could not find her, so he gave up. He had casually mentioned it that day. If she was not willing to come, then there was nothing he could do. Lu Yi checked and found that it was a message from Tang Jun. There was only one word, "Come." He had obviously sensed that Lu Yi had gone over, but at that time he was entertaining guests and did not dare to neglect them. Lu Yi headed straight for Tang Jun's sleeping quarters. Not long after, he saw the old fellow in the guest hall. A beautiful maid came to serve tea, and Lu Yi clicked his tongue in amazement. The old man looked a little high-spirited now and, "Why do you look so much younger?" Lu Yi frowned, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Tang Jun smiled proudly. "A few days ago I spent a lot of money to buy a longevity fruit. It increased my lifespan by a lot. Looks like it has some effect." Lu Yi knew that the old man did not have much lifespan left, but he had not expected him to buy a spirit fruit that could increase his lifespan. His luck was really extraordinary. "Aren't you not afraid of death?" Lu Yi joked. In the past, Tang Jun had indeed given him the impression that he was not afraid of death, because the old man also knew that he did not have much longer to live. Tang Jun smiled and said, "I was not afraid of death before because there was nothing to look forward to. Now that there is something to look forward to, I naturally want to live a little longer." The old man could be said to be flushed with success recently. Thinking back to when he first came to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he was a Yuyao, but no force was willing to accept him. He was like a homeless stray, pitiful and pitiful. However, things were different now. As the only Yuyao cultivator on Peerless Island, and a middle Yuyao cultivator at that, Island Master Chu Xin undoubtedly valued him very much. Not only did he give him a very generous salary, but he also had a certain right to speak and make suggestions on the management of Peerless Island. It was because of this that many Yuyao cultivators came to visit him personally and befriend him. If it were not for this relationship, he would not have been able to buy a treasure like the longevity fruit that could increase his lifespan so easily. Along with the rise of Peerless Island, Tang Jun also had his own ambitions. He felt that he could still strive for a higher level. Even if he did not reach the sunshine level, he should at least reach the late Yuyao stage, right? By the way, Brat Chu disappeared for half a year. What did he do this time? Tang Jun looked at Lu Yi with some dissatisfaction. Lu Yi had disappeared for half a year before, and that was when he went to the secret place with Bansi. This time he disappeared for another half a year. He was simply elusive. Lu Ye's expression was solemn. "Old Tang, I know how to return to Jade Conch." Tang Jun curled his lips. "Where did you get this information from? Don't be fooled." After such an experience, Tang Jun did not have much hope in the information Lu Yi obtained. Recently, he had also been quietly looking for information, but unfortunately he did not find anything. He could not find any useful information on his side, so he did not believe that Lu Yi could make any progress. I can't say in detail where the information came from, but there is absolutely no problem this time. Tang Jun's expression slowly became serious, and he turned to look at Lu Yi. He knew who Lu Yi was, and for Lu Yi to use the word, absolutely, it meant that the information this time was quite reliable. "How long will it take?" Tang Jun asked in a deep voice. Lu Yi knew he was asking about the distance, so he replied, "Within 3 to 5 years. What do you plan to do?" Lu Yi said, "Of course we will unite the Qingli Dao world and Jade Conch world, and then bring people back to the Wanxiang Sea. Jade Conch is too remote, and it is not a good thing to stay in that place. Only by letting them come to the Wanxiang Sea and see the myriad sights can our two worlds develop well in the future." Tang Jun nodded slightly. "There is no problem with the Qingli Dao world. You can go and tell Wu Zhua and he will cooperate with you. As for Jade Conch, Last time Tang Jun gave Lu Yi a jade slip and asked him to bring it to Wuxia. Unfortunately, Lu Yi was tricked by Zhu Yuan and took him to see the former Nine States cultivator Ma Bin, and did not return to Nine States at all. You can think of a way to deal with Jade Conch. The people there are not easy to deal with. Tang Jun shook his head slowly. He did not have much contact with the people of Jade Conch world, but he could feel that they were arrogant. Lu Yi, who was in the constellation realm, would not go well in Jade Conch. Lu Yi smiled and said, I will bring them along to make a fortune. If they are still not willing, then there is nothing to say. Let them fend for themselves. When are you leaving? In a few days. I still have some things to arrange. Let me know when you are leaving, I will send you on your way. Lu Yi nodded. When the time comes, I will indeed need your help. Originally, Lu Yi was worried that the old man's help would not be useful. Seeing the situation today, the old man was considered a figure in the Wanxiangxi. It was better to let him help than to let Lu Yi do it himself. Returning to his cave, Lu Yi reminded Li Shang to stay here, and he left Wushuang Island. Leaving the Wanxiangxi, he came to the hidden place of the Desolate Star as usual. He blew the Qinghai conch to open the door, transformed into Fu Wuzuan and stepped in. Just as he steadied himself, a figure pounced on him and started punching and kicking him. Lu Yi raised his hand to block and caught the attacking figure in a few moves. Looking at Spectre, who had her back facing him with her butt sticking out, Lu Yi said angrily, What are you doing? Are you rebelling? Spectre tilted her head and said angrily, Let go. Her hands were hurting from Lu Ye's grip, and it was really uncomfortable to be in such a shameful position. Lu Yi pushed hard, and Spectre took a few steps forward before she could steady herself. She said angrily, Where the hell have you been? Why didn't you come to pick me up after so long? Didn't you want to come here yourself? It was Spectre who had been clamoring all day to come here to cultivate with Bai Lu, but now she was blaming him. It was really unreasonable. But you can't just leave me here. Spectre was furious. As she spoke, she glared at Lu Yi fiercely and walked towards the door. She was obviously going to leave. She had entered and exited this place several times, and she knew that she did not need to wait for Lu Yi. As long as the door was still there, she could leave on her own. Before she disappeared, she said to Lu Yi fiercely, When I ascend, the first person Yu Yao will deal with will be you. Only then did Lu Yi understand why she was in such a hurry to leave. She was obviously preparing to ascend. Spectre appeared in the hidden Desolate Star and hurriedly fled, afraid that Fa Wuzuan would chase after her and beat her up. She secretly planned to capture Fa Wuzuan and give him a good beating after she ascended to Yu Yao. She would avenge the humiliation she had suffered repeatedly. In the merfolk's territory, Lu Yi had no intention of leaving at all. When the door disappeared, Bai Lu, who had heard the commotion, hurried over. Bai Lu was obviously very happy to see Lu Yi. End of chapter. Chapter 1521. After chatting with Bai Lu for a while, Lu Yi told her the purpose of his visit. Bai Lu quickly brought him to see Great Elder Yen Miao. Lu Yi had come to the merfolk's territory for no other reason than to borrow money. He didn't have many spirit jades left. Now that he was preparing to return to the 9 provinces, he naturally had to buy some things. Not to mention other things, he definitely had to buy a batch of star boats. Otherwise, with so many constellations in the 9 provinces, it would be more time-consuming and unsafe to fly all the way here. Moreover, the star boats he wanted to buy were not small star boats, but large ones that could accommodate many people. These things were generally more expensive. Hearing this, Yen Miao smiled and said, How much do you want? Lu Yi said, How much can you give me? Yen Miao pondered for a moment and said, Is 50 million enough? Although the mermaid clan occupied a huge spiritual jade vein as their habitat, it was not to say that they could casually mine it. This was because this was their habitat, so there was a plan to mine the spiritual jade. Under the premise of ensuring that the scale of the vein would not be reduced, the amount of spiritual jade that could be mined every year was limited. Moreover, the Merfolk clan also needed spirit jades to cultivate, so they had to keep some for backup. The Merfolk clan could only take out 50 million. That's enough. Lu Yi quickly nodded. He just wanted to buy some star boats, so it shouldn't cost too much. Then please wait for a moment. I'll ask my clansmen to pack them up and send them to you. Yen Miao left and didn't let Lu Yi wait for too long. In just 2 hours, a merfolk sent 50 million spirit jades to him. Lu Yi wanted to write an IOU, but Bai Lu stopped him. She asked him to send more spirit pills or other materials that the merfolk needed in the future. Lu Yi said, I'm afraid I won't be able to come back for the next 10 years. Bai Lu's expression changed slightly. What's wrong? I have to go back to my homeland. It's a long journey, so it will take some time. Bai Lu finally understood. Although she was reluctant, she couldn't stop him. She could only ask Lu Yi to report his safety as soon as he came back in the future. Lu Yi readily agreed. As usual, he borrowed a seahorse from the Merfolk clan and rode it to the Constellation Palace. Half a day later, he arrived at the Constellation Palace. He pushed the door open and walked in. The seahorse Star Beast had followed Lu Yi back several times and was already familiar with the route. Seeing Lu Yi enter the Constellation Hall, it returned to the mermaid territory. Lu Yi had left some storage rings in the Constellation Palace, which contained a large amount of spirit-refining grass and the corpses of star beasts in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lu Yi thought for a while and decided to take some as backup. He left the rest here, and then returned to the unparalleled island through the door of the Minor Constellation Palace. After swimming for a distance, he quietly left the sea and returned to Wushuang Island. Just as he entered the spiritual island, Chu Shen welcomed him. "Senior brother, you're back?" He had heard that Lu Yi had returned, but he hadn't been able to find Lu Ye's whereabouts. He didn't know when Lu Yi had gone out. "Yes, what's the matter?" Lu Yi asked. Chu Shen said mysteriously, "Senior martial brother, follow me first." Saying so, he led Lu Yi to his sleeping quarters, then presented a storage ring to Lu Yi as if he was presenting a treasure, and said happily, "Senior brother, please take a look." Lu Yi was puzzled. He picked up the storage ring and checked it with his consciousness. There was nothing inside, only about 10 million spiritual jades. "This is..." Lu Yi looked at him. Chu Shen said, "These are the spiritual jades from the sale of the formation plates, senior martial brother, and our Wushuang Island's share of the profits." "So much?" Lu Yi was surprised. Lu Yi wasn't sure how many spiritual jades were sold from the formation plates, but he was sure that it wasn't that much. It could be said that more than half of it came from the Wushuang Island's share of the profits. Chu Shen was full of smiles. "Big brother, you don't know, but our Wushuang Island is now famous. It's a famous brand on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Just by renting the shops we earn a lot every year. We even participate in the management of some of the shops, so we get a share of the profits. It's not an exaggeration to say that we earn a lot of money every day. This is just the beginning, we'll earn more in the future." Lu Yi was full of praise. "Well done." After being praised, Chu Shen smiled even more happily. "It's all thanks to Senior Martial Brother's nurturing. Without you, Wushuang Island wouldn't be what it is today." Lu Yi shook his head. Although he did help a little when the Wushuang Island was first established, the development of the Wushuang Island today was inseparable from Chu Shen's initial planning and various efforts during this period. Chu Shen contributed a lot to the prosperity of the Wushuang Island today. Now that Chu Shen was mentioned, everyone knew that he was the island master of the Wushuang Island. Everyone had to give him face. No one would say that he was the son of a Sunshine Sect master or the son of Jiu Yan. This was the result that Chu Shen wanted. A constellation mansion, leading a group of constellations, to be able to build such a huge foundation in a complicated environment like the 10,000 Elephant Sea was simply a legend. "Alright, I'll be leaving soon. I'll only be back in 10 years. Lu Yi said. Chu Shen was shocked. "Where are you going, senior martial brother?" "Back to my homeland." Chu Shen understood. Since Lu Yi was going back to his homeland, it was only natural. However, he didn't know where Lu Ye's homeland was. A return trip would take 10 years. "Senior martial brother, do you want to bring a few people with you? They can help you along the way," Chu Shen said. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was inappropriate. The pharaoh was already a peak constellation mansion expert. Who on the Wushuang Island could help him? There was only Tang Jun, but Tang Jun was the only Yu Yao on the Wushuang Island. If he left, who would oversee the Wushuang Island? No need. Lu Yi shook his head. "I'll go and come back quickly. It'll be more comfortable." "Then, senior martial brother, be careful." "I'll wait for senior martial brother's return," Chu Shen said seriously. Lu Yi nodded. Then he thought of another matter. "Is there a shop on our island that sells star boats?" Chu Shen said, "There is." "Does senior martial brother want to buy a star boat?" "I want to buy a batch." "How's the quality and price of the star boats in that shop compared to the ones in the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce?" Chu Shen smiled and said, "Many of the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce's star boats are provided by them. Therefore their quality is guaranteed. Moreover, the price is slightly cheaper than the ones in the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce. Of course, if senior martial brother wants to buy one, I'll ask them to give you the best price." Half a day later, under Chu Shen's persuasion, A late-stage Constellation Mansion cultivator brought an exquisite album to Lu Yi. He politely handed the album to Lu Yi. The album seemed to be forged from a unique metal. There were pictures of all kinds of star boats on the album. When Lu Yi channeled his spiritual energy into the album, the pictures seemed to come alive. They turned into illusory figures and floated in front of Lu Yi, allowing him to inspect the star boat more thoroughly. Lu Yi kept inspecting the album. He found that the star boats were indeed very good. There were all kinds of star boats. Not only was there a complete variety, but they were also of high quality. Lu Yi soon took a fancy to a star boat called the Silver Fish. Su Yuqing had given him a star boat with the same name. Moreover, the appearance of the star boat was similar to the one in the album. It looked like a silver fish. However, the planetary ship Su Yuqing gave him was only a small one, and it could carry 9 people at most. However, the silver fish that Lu Yi had his eyes on was a large spirit boat. It would not be a problem for it to carry more than 100 people. The price was not cheap at all. Even though Chu Xin had given him the best price, it still cost 800,000 spirit jades. Lu Yi planned to buy 30 of them. Firstly, there were too many constellations in the 9 prefectures. If he didn't have enough planetary boats, he wouldn't have enough of them. Secondly, he wanted to leave some of them in the 9 prefectures so that when the 9 prefectures wanted to come to the Wanxiang Sea in the future, they could use them. Although Lu Yi had already taken a fancy to the Silverfish planetary ship, he still flipped to the back to see if there was anything more suitable. However, Lu Yi didn't take a fancy to a star boat. Instead, he took a fancy to a warship called the Tiger Shark. After pondering for a moment, he realized that it would be safer to have a large number of star boats sailing in the Starry River if they were protected by starships. The Tiger Shark warship was shaped like a shark in the sea, looking very ferocious. It was not a large warship, but a small one. It could be piloted by 3 to 5 people. After all, even with Lu Ye's current wealth, he could not afford a large warship. The price of a warship was undoubtedly more expensive. Even though the Tiger Shark warship was only a small warship, it was still worth 500,000 spirit jades each. After a brief calculation, Lu Yi finally placed an order with the Star Cultivator. He ordered 30 Silverfish planetary ships and 10 Tiger Shark warships. The 60 million spirit jades that he had just received were instantly reduced by more than half. Obviously, the Star Cultivator did not expect such a big deal. After receiving the deposit, he beamed with joy and promised that he would prepare the goods and deliver them to him within 10 days. After the Star Cultivator left, Lu Yi sent a message to Tang Jun. Then he ran to Anji's shop and bought some dragon breath crystals as backup. He also bought many miscellaneous gifts, preparing to give them to his friends. After all the shopping, Lu Yi was only left with 10 million spirit jades. He could no longer use them. Whether it was the star boats or the warships, they would all need some spirit jades to sail in the future. He returned to his own cave and waited patiently. During this time, Lu Yi tried to send a message to Pu Ku. After all, Pu Ku was one of the few friends he had in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Since he was going to leave, he should at least give him a heads up. However, he found that he could not contact Pu Ku. Suddenly, he remembered that Pu Ku had run away a long time ago. He seemed to be avoiding his betrothal. He wondered if Pu Ku had advanced to Yu Yao's realm. Logically speaking, he should have entered the Constellation Hall a long time ago. In less than 10 days, the star boats and warships that Lu Yi had ordered were ready. Lu Yi personally inspected the star boats and warships and made sure that they were in good condition. There were no signs of damage or traces of them being used before he handed over the remaining spirit jades. Now that everything was ready, he could set off for the land of the 9 provinces. Inside the cave, Lu Yi stood up and looked at Li Shang beside him. Li Shang understood what he meant and pounced on Lu Yi. She activated the soul possession secret technique and attached herself to Lu Ye's body. Her identity was special, and it was not convenient for her to be exposed. Even if the soul race had a special ability that allowed them to conceal themselves, she could not guarantee that she would be able to escape Yu Yao's detection. End of chapter. Chapter 1522. Lu Yi flashed out of the cave. Tang Jun was waiting outside with a solemn expression. When he saw Lu Yi, he called out, "Let's go." Lu Yi summoned a planetary boat and stepped on it. Tang Jun steered the boat and soon flew out of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. After flying for half a month, the galaxy suddenly became lively. A large number of cultivators gathered in the same direction, which was exactly where Tang Jun and Lu Yi were heading. What's going on? Lu Yi looked around curiously. Tang Jun shook his head. I'm not sure, but it can't be anything bad. Cultivators were a group of people who wouldn't wake up early if there was no benefit. Something that could attract so many cultivators must be something good. The further they went, the more lively it became. So many cultivators appeared out of nowhere. A few days later, an entrance to the insect passage appeared in front of them. Looking from afar, they saw a long line in front of the insect passage. Many cultivators rushed out of the insect passage and entered the 10,000 elephant galaxy. Lu Yi frowned. Old Tang, is that the insect passage to the Long Cloud Galaxy? According to the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree, he had to pass through 2 galaxies if he wanted to return to the 9 states from the 10,000 elephant galaxy. The first one he had to pass through was the Long Cloud Galaxy. The Long Cloud Galaxy was connected to the 10,000 elephant galaxy by the insect passage, so it was very convenient. However, the insect passage of each galaxy was guarded by the local powerhouses. Without some connections, it was impossible to pass through freely. Lu Yi could only ask Tang Jun to find a way. Fortunately, the Long Cloud Galaxy had a partnership with the Peerless Island. There were 2 shops in the Long Cloud Galaxy on the island. Tang Jun had some connections with Yu Yao of the Long Cloud Galaxy. With his help, it wouldn't be a problem for Lu Yi to enter the Long Cloud Galaxy. However, it seemed that Lu Yi wasn't the only one who wanted to enter the Long Cloud Galaxy. There were many people, but Yu Yao, who guarded the entrance to the insect passage, didn't seem to have any intention of stopping them. This was a little strange. When they got closer, they found that the cultivators who wanted to enter the Long Cloud Galaxy had to pay a certain amount of spirit jades. Moreover, the price was quite high. Each person had to pay 5,000 spirit jades. For ordinary constellations, 5,000 spirit jades was a considerable amount of wealth. Lu Yi had spent a lot of effort to catch a white spirit, but it only cost him 3,000 to 4,000 spirit jades. Tang Jun put away the star boat and led Lu Yi straight to Yu Yao, who was standing at the side of the path. Brother Tang. Seeing Tang Jun, Yu Yao hurriedly cupped her fists. Tang Jun returned the greeting and walked to Yu Yao's side. He asked curiously, Brother Zhang, what's going on? Why are there so many people wanting to enter your Long Cloud Galaxy? Yu Yao chuckled and said, Brother Tang, you might not know this, but the Wheel of Fortune suddenly appeared in our Long Cloud Galaxy. Once the news spread, it became like this. Tang Jun was stunned when he heard this. The fortune wheel? He couldn't help but sigh. Your galaxy is truly a blessed place. Such a divine object has actually descended. You should all be rich. Yu Yao Zhang laughed heartily. It was just luck. We didn't expect something like this to happen either. Our fellow cultivators were too enthusiastic, so we couldn't stop them. We could only charge them some passage fees and let them seek their own fortune. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Yi, who was standing next to Tang Jun, and asked, Is this Brother Tang's junior? Tang Jun nodded. A good-for-nothing nephew. He wants to travel around to gain experience, but for some reason he wants to go to your Long Cloud Galaxy. But don't worry, Brother Zhang. Although this kid's strength isn't much, he's not a troublemaker. He won't make things difficult for your galaxy. Lu Yi calmly stepped forward and bowed. Greetings, Senior Zhang. Yu Yao Zhang smiled slightly and said, Since he's Brother Tang's subordinate, the passage fee will be waived. You can enter Long Cloud Galaxy with this token. If anyone investigates your background, just show it to them. Saying so, he handed Lu Yi a token. Lu Yi thanked him and took it. Yu Yao Zhang then said, It's a rare opportunity. Why don't you try your luck at the Wheel of Fortune, little friend? Who knows, you might encounter something good. Tang Jun cupped his fists and said, Then this old man will send him over first. I won't disturb you anymore. Go ahead, Brother Tang. Yu Yao Zhang gestured. The two walked to the side and Tang Jun transmitted his voice, You're quite lucky, kid. You actually came across the Wheel of Fortune. If I had known, I wouldn't have wasted this favor. He paused for a moment. Do you know what the Wheel of Fortune is? I've heard of it. Lu Yi nodded. He had seen records of it in the dwarf tribe's rest pool pavilion. Because it was very interesting, it had left a deep impression on him. Strictly speaking, the Wheel of Fortune was a Starry Sky Supreme Treasure. But unlike most Starry Sky Supreme Treasures, this thing was not fixed in one place. Instead, it would disappear and reappear from time to time. Its position and time of appearance were completely irregular. Because there were many insect passages in the Thousand Phenomenon Sea that connected to the major galaxies, cultivators in the Thousand Phenomenon Sea would often receive news of the Wheel of Fortune's appearance and rush over. As for the galaxies where the Wheel of Fortune had appeared, they would do the same thing as the Long Cloud Galaxy. They wouldn't stop cultivators from entering, as doing so would incur the wrath of the masses. Instead, they would charge a certain amount of spirit jades as passage fees. This way they could earn quite a bit of spirit jades. Basically, each appearance of the Wheel of Fortune could earn a galaxy at least a few 100 million spirit jades. Such a huge amount was not a small amount anywhere. This was also the reason why the Wheel of Fortune had the word fortune in it. Whenever it appeared, it would bring fortune to the star system where it appeared. However, if cultivators were to participate, not only would they receive good fortune, they might also receive bad fortune. This was a matter of pure luck. No one could predict what would happen. I won't say much about what you already know. You can participate in this matter. It won't take too much time anyway, Tang Jun said. Understood. Lu Yi nodded. Then I'll be going. Take care of yourself. Go. Tang Jun waved his hand. He also wanted to try the Wheel of Fortune and see if he could benefit from it. However, the people in the Long Cloud Galaxy obviously wouldn't let a random Yu Yao enter their galaxy. Otherwise, once the entrance was opened, many Yu Yao would definitely come over. At that time, the Long Cloud Galaxy would be unable to suppress them. Thus, they could only let the star mansions enter. Lu Yi turned around and walked toward the insect passage. He did not need to line up to enter. The insect passage was very large, and there were people entering and exiting. He only needed to enter from a place where there was no one. Without any sound, the scenery around him became strange and dazzling. When Lu Yi regained his footing, he had already arrived at the Long Cloud Galaxy. The Yu Yao of the Long Cloud Galaxy was also there. Thus, although there were many cultivators here, no one dared to cause trouble here. There was no need to ask where the Wheel of Fortune was. He only needed to follow the flow of people. Lu Yi summoned his stellar boat and flew forward with the flow of people. Li Shang released his soul from his body and silently stood beside him. Although there were many cultivators nearby, they were all at the Star Mansion's realm, so they did not have to worry about being discovered. Everyone was excitedly rushing in the same direction. The journey was peaceful. 5 days later, a huge copper plate suddenly appeared in front of them. It towered in the starry sky. The copper plate was grand and ancient. It looked tattered as if it had been through a lot of battles. It was hard to imagine what kind of cruel battles this starry sky supreme treasure had gone through to become like this. There had been Sunshine Realm cultivators who had tried to subdue it, but no one had ever succeeded. After all, no matter how tattered it looked, a starry sky supreme treasure was still a starry sky supreme treasure. It was not something that could be easily subdued. There were many cultivators gathered around the copper plate. Most of them were Star Mansion's realm cultivators. There were also several Yu Yao cultivators scattered in different directions. They should be the Yu Yao of the Long Cloud Galaxy. Cultivators kept disappearing into the copper plate from all directions. There were also cultivators who appeared from the copper plate. Some of them looked happy. Clearly they had gained something from the copper plate. There were also some who shook their heads and sighed. They probably did not gain anything. Fortunately, when Lu Yi arrived, he happened to see a cultivator appear from the copper plate. His entire body was pitch black and he looked terrified. He did not know what had happened to him inside. Immediately after, there was the sound of a thunderclap. A bolt of purple lightning appeared above the cultivator's head and struck him straight down. That cultivator had the cultivation of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. When he saw this, he shouted loudly and activated a protective spiritual treasure above his head. However, the purple lightning only struck once, and that protective spiritual treasure was shattered into pieces. There was another thunderclap. Another purple lightning bolt struck. The cultivator's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly rushed in the direction of a nearby Yu Yao. He shouted, "Senior, save me." That Yu Yao only looked on coldly, unmoved. When the purple lightning bolt struck, the cultivator's body swayed. He looked even more wretched. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his aura became extremely weak. Although he did not die, his injuries were very serious. No one knew how long it would take for him to recover. The cultivator did not linger. He forced himself to stay alert and flew into the distance. Soon he disappeared. The many cultivators nearby felt their hearts tremble as they watched. Entering the Wheel of Fortune wasn't a competition of strength. It was all about luck. If one was lucky, they might be able to obtain some benefits. If one was unlucky, they might even lose their lives. As for what kind of benefits there were inside the Wheel of Fortune, no one knew. Those who had gained something would hide it and not let others see it. However, it was said that some people had obtained a transcendent treasure that was very suitable for them. Lu Yi did not expect to gain much. It would be great if he could get a piece of Phoenix Sky's blue crystal. Last time, Half-CI had invited him to accompany her to the secret place. They had agreed that he would use the Phoenix Sky's blue crystal as a reward. In the end, there was an accident. Lu Yi had not seen Half Ci since then. After observing from the side for a while, Lu Yi discovered that many people were unlucky. Some were struck by lightning, some were burned by fire, and some were covered in a layer of black smoke after coming out. They looked extremely unlucky. No one knew what they had encountered. End of chapter. Chapter 1523. Lu Yi watched from the side for a long time and found that it was indeed a matter of luck. There was no pattern to it at all. Some people looked like bad guys, but after coming out of the Wheel of Fortune, nothing happened to them. Some people looked righteous and proud, but after coming out of the Wheel of Fortune they looked miserable. It had nothing to do with cultivation. "Let's go in too," Lu Yi said softly. Li Shang, who had been standing beside him, immediately activated the soul possession secret technique and attached himself to Lu Yi. Lu Yi put away the star boat and slammed it into the broken copper disc. A layer of ripples spread out as if he had crashed into water. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he found himself in a misty space. There was nothing else in the space except for an illusory copper plate that was as tall as a person. It didn't look any different from the huge copper plate outside, but it was obviously complete. Moreover, there were all kinds of strange patterns engraved on the copper plate. Each pattern was extremely small, and there were at least 100,000 of them. What was even more bizarre was that these patterns were constantly changing, giving birth to more patterns. Li Shang removed the soul possession secret technique and appeared beside Lu Yi, curiously looking at the copper disc in front of her. It was the first time she had seen the Wheel of Fortune, so she was naturally curious. Lu Yi knew how to activate the Wheel of Fortune. Since there was no pattern and it was a matter of luck, there was no reason for him to hesitate. Lu Yi had always felt that his luck was pretty good. He immediately circulated his secret technique, forced out a drop of his blood essence, and flicked it at the copper disc. If one wanted to spin the Wheel of Fortune, they had to use their own blood essence as a guide. Every time the Wheel of Fortune appeared, a cultivator only had one chance to spin it. After that, they could only wait for the next time the Wheel of Fortune appeared. The blood essence contained a huge amount of energy, and when it fell on the copper disc, it was absorbed by the copper disc in the blink of an eye. And then, there was no then. Lu Yi stared at the motionless copper plate in amazement. He couldn't understand this because in the records he had read, when the copper plate absorbed a cultivator's essence blood, it would start to spin. The patterns on it would also flicker. When the copper plate stopped spinning, the patterns that were still lit up would give the cultivator the corresponding fortune or misfortune. But what was the meaning of this copper plate not moving after absorbing his essence blood? Is this thing broken? After thinking about it for a while, it was still a starry sky supreme treasure. How could it possibly break down? Moreover, with so many cultivators participating in it, although Lu Yi did not see any of them participating, it was clear that many of them had benefited from it. How could it be broken when it was his turn? But after waiting for a long time, the copper plate didn't react at all. Lu Yi tilted his head and looked at Li Shang. "You try." Even if Lu Yi didn't say anything, Li Shang still intended to give it a try. Such a rare opportunity naturally couldn't be missed. However, the Spiritas had a special physique. Their bodies were illusory and did not have any blood essence, but the Spiritas had a similar method. An extremely pure soul force suddenly separated from Li Shang's body and entered the copper plate. Then Li Shang clasped his hands together, a pious expression on his face as he prayed to the copper plate, his mouth muttering some unknown words. Seeing this, Lu Yi couldn't help feeling disdainful. This was a matter of luck, so it would be strange if Li Shang's actions worked. Moreover, there seemed to be a problem with the copper plate, so whether or not it could be used was another matter. But to Lu Yi's surprise, after Li Shang's pure soul force was absorbed by the copper plate actually began to spin rapidly. At the same time, the many patterns on its surface began to flicker at an extremely fast speed. This thing, it wasn't broken. Then why couldn't he activate it? Lu Yi couldn't help but feel resentful. The speed of the copper plate's rotation gradually slowed down, but the patterns on its surface flickered even more frequently. Correspondingly, Li Shang's expression became even more pious. A moment later, when the rotating copper plate stabilized, one of the patterns on its surface began to shine brightly. Then a stream of light rushed out from the pattern and directly entered Li Shang's body. Li Shang's body shook slightly, but immediately revealed a happy expression. Seeing this, Lu Yi immediately knew that Li Shang had obtained some benefits, but he didn't know what the specific benefits were, so it wasn't good to ask. Li Shang didn't have the slightest intention of hiding it. With a flip of his small hand, a copper ring appeared in his palm. This copper ring fluctuated with an extremely strange aura. Soul tool. Lu Ye's eyes widened. Moreover, he could see that this copper ring was not an ordinary soul tool. It was most likely a magic tool level soul tool. Compared to ordinary treasures, soul tools were much more precious and rare, not to mention a magic tool level soul tool. This thing was simply a priceless treasure. Moreover, this thing was different from ordinary magic tools. Ordinary magic tools in Li Shang's hands could not be activated because spiritual power was not enough to activate them. Only Fa Li could do so. However, Li Shang could activate a magic tool level soul tool, but the power it could display would be reduced. He poured his essence blood into the copper plate, but it didn't move. Li Shang, on the other hand, obtained such an amazing soul tool. The contrast was like heaven and earth. Could it be that the way he poured his essence blood was wrong? Lu Yi understood, but he didn't have time to envy Li Shang. He urged another drop of essence blood and poured it into the copper plate. Then, imitating Li Shang, he put his hands together and prayed solemnly. His eyes narrowed into slits, quietly observing the copper plate's reaction. The result was that this thing was still the same as before, motionless. Lu Ye's face turned black. He always thought that his luck was not too bad, but now he couldn't even activate the copper plate. This was completely unreasonable. Li Shang held back his laughter and comforted Lu Yi. Although you can't get good luck, there is also no bad luck. I heard that many people came here and really didn't get anything. I don't believe it. Lu Ye's face darkened. There were indeed many people who didn't get anything from the Wheel of Fortune. There was no benefit or harm, but it was impossible for the Wheel of Fortune to not have any reaction. Lu Yi felt that he was being targeted. But he couldn't figure out why. Unwilling to give up, he urged another drop of essence blood. This time, Lu Ye's posture was even more sincere than before, but it still didn't have any effect. Hatefully staring at the copper plate in front of him, Lu Yi had scruples about this thing being a starry sky treasure and having unfathomable abilities. He would have already slashed it. Let's go. Lu Yi called Li Shang and turned around. He tried 3 times but still couldn't make the copper plate react, so there was no need to try again. Losing too much essence blood would also affect his body. Unexpectedly, just as he turned around, the back of his head suddenly suffered a blow. It didn't hurt, but it made Lu Yi feel like he was facing a great enemy and quickly turned around. With a ding-dong, Lu Yi looked in the direction of the sound and found that there was something else on the ground. Looking carefully, it looked like a white jade pear, but it wasn't a real pear. Taking a closer look, it also didn't look like a pear because it had many sound holes. Lu Yi frowned and looked at the thing on the ground, then at the Wheel of Fortune in front of him, unable to figure out what was going on. There was no doubt that this white jade pear came from the Wheel of Fortune, otherwise, it wouldn't have hit him on the back of his head. But he clearly hadn't spun the Wheel of Fortune, so how did this thing come out? For me? Lu Yi looked at the Wheel of Fortune suspiciously. Most Starry Sky Supreme treasures had their own intelligence, not to mention the reincarnation tree. Even the Constellation Palace, although it had never communicated with Lu Yi, had its own intelligence. So Lu Yi guessed that the Wheel of Fortune also had its own intelligence. Lu Yi really didn't understand why the Wheel of Fortune would give him such a thing when he couldn't spin it. Naturally, he didn't get any response. After waiting for a while and making sure there was nothing wrong with the white jade pear, Lu Yi bent down and picked it up. When he held it in his hand, Lu Yi saw that it wasn't a white jade pear at all, but an ocarina. It wasn't made of white jade but some kind of inexplicable beast bone. Lu Yi stared at the copper plate deeply, but couldn't find any way to investigate it. He could only leave this place with Li Shang. Outside the Wheel of Fortune, it was still as lively as before. Countless cultivators were coming in and out, some were beaming with joy and some were extremely unlucky. It was really a case of some happy people and some sad people. He summoned the star boat and flew into the depths of the starry sky, gradually leaving the bustling place behind. He took out the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree and checked it against the star positions in the surroundings to make sure he didn't deviate from his course. This was a necessary method to travel in the starry sky, because once he deviated from his course, a slight mistake would lead to a huge mistake. Lu Yi didn't want to go through the entire long cloud galaxy. He wanted to go to a dead star in it, which was the first stop on his way home. As for the mystery of that dead star, he would only know when he got there. The journey was not short. With the star boat's current speed, it would take him at least 3 months to arrive. On the star boat, Li Shang was fiddling with his new bronze ring soul tool with a look of fondness on his face. Although Lu Yi didn't know what kind of magical power this bronze ring had, he knew it must be something good just by looking at Li Shang's expression. Lu Yi took out the bone ocarina he got from the copper plate and checked it. This thing had a small hole at the top and a few holes at the bottom. Lu Yi examined it carefully and found that he couldn't tell what level this bone ocarina was at, because it looked very ordinary and didn't have any restrictive spells inside. He tried to pour his spiritual energy into it, but there was no reaction. This thing was not a treasure at all. It was more like a toy. Lu Yi was so angry that his nose became crooked. Either he didn't give him anything or he gave him something good, but he didn't give him the heavenly phoenix blue crystal or any other spirit or magical treasure. What was the meaning of this bone ocarina? Lu Yi felt the Wheel of Fortune was being treated very differently. End of chapter. Chapter 1524. Lu Yi was in a bad mood, but he had nowhere to vent his frustration. He could only sullenly pick up the bone sun, put it to his mouth and play with all his might. An unpleasant tone echoed out from the star boat. He really didn't have any talent in music. When he was tested in the Mermaid Clan's Conch Palace, he had relied on his own unique skills to pass. How could he play a bone sun? Li Shang's good mood was ruined. He helplessly stretched out his hand to Lu Yi and said, "Give it to me. You know how to play it?" Lu Yi looked at him in surprise. "I've learned a little," Li Shang replied. Li Shang definitely hadn't just learned a little. When the bone sun played, a desolate and ancient atmosphere began to fill the air. After he finished playing, Li Shang returned the bone sun to Lu Yi. Lu Yi waved his hand and said, "You can have it." The sun was completely useless to him. The journey was long and he had nothing to do, so it was good to listen to Li Shang play a few songs to relieve his boredom. As soon as these words fell, Lu Yi suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. He saw a huge figure rapidly moving towards him, and under the illumination of the surrounding starlight, this figure appeared particularly ferocious and terrifying. A lunar star beast. Li Shang also noticed the figure of the star beast and couldn't help but exclaim. Lu Yi hurriedly accelerated the star boat and fled into the distance. He had personally experienced the terror of a lunar star beast. Previously, he had joined forces with Ban Ci to kill a Heaven Desire demonic spider. However, that time they had the advantage of a sneak attack. If they faced it head-on, they would definitely be no match for it. The aura of this star beast was much stronger than that of a Heaven Desire demonic spider. It might even be comparable to the late lunar star beast. With Lu Yi and Li Shang's small bodies, how could they resist it? The star boat morphed into a streak of light and continued to fly forward. The star beast chased after it relentlessly. Even though it was huge and clumsy, its speed wasn't slow at all. Even though Lu Yi had increased the speed of the star boat to the maximum, he could barely keep up with it. Logically speaking, when star beasts encountered creatures in the starry sky, if they couldn't catch them for a long time, they would give up. However, for some reason this lunar star beast couldn't get rid of it. Lu Yi had been in a stalemate with it for half a month. This fellow was like a tail that could not be shaken off. Needless to say, Lu Yi had consumed a significant amount of spirit jades during the past half a month. After all, the star boat had to rely on spirit jades to travel at full speed. Lu Yi didn't understand. He hadn't offended the moon jade star beast, so why was it so persistent? Continuing like this was not a solution. Seeing that there was no way to get rid of the star beast, Lu Yi could only shoot out imperial equipment to the side. After flying for a while, Lu Yi shouted to Li Shang, "Enchantment." Without the slightest hesitation, Li Shang attached himself to Lu Yi. Immediately afterwards, Lu Yi put away his star boat and vanished into thin air. When he reappeared, he was already at the location of the imperial equipment he had shot out. He was tens of thousands of miles away from where he was before. He quickly looked around and found a huge meteorite. Hiding on it, he activated the concealment and aura-restraining spirit tattoos to enhance himself and attached himself to the meteorite like a ghost. A terrifying aura came from tens of thousands of miles away. Without a doubt, the Moon Jade Star Beast was furious after losing its target. Lu Yi was even more certain that it was a star beast comparable to the late Moon Jade Star Beast. He didn't dare to move recklessly, nor did he dare to let his aura leak. He drifted along the meteorite's course into the depths of the starry sky. During this time, he even sensed traces of the Moon Jade Star Beast passing by several thousand miles away. Obviously, it was still searching around. After drifting like this for a few days, Lu Yi was certain that he could no longer sense the Moon Jade Star Beast's aura. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and deactivate his concealment and aura-restraining spirit tattoos. After looking around for a while, Lu Yi reconfirmed his position and planned his course. Then he summoned his star boat and flew forward. With his previous experience, Lu Yi was even more cautious this time. Dangers were everywhere in the starry sky. This time he was lucky that he had only encountered the Moonjade Star Beast. At least he had the ability to get rid of it. If he had encountered Ri Guang, then he and Li Shang would have to wash their necks clean. The next half a month passed peacefully, allowing Lu Yi and Li Shang to relax a lot. Speaking of which, although there were many dangers in the starry sky, they weren't easy to encounter. If they really encountered a crisis that was difficult to deal with, then they could only blame it on their bad luck. The melodious sound of the bone sun rang out again. Li Shang seemed to like this musical instrument very much. Before he could finish the song, Lu Ye's expression changed drastically. This was because he sensed the aura of the Moonjade Star Beast again, and there was more than one of them. Turning his head, he saw 3 streaks of fiery red light shooting toward him from the depths of the starry sky. Through the light, Lu Yi saw 3 horses. 2 of the horses were big and 1 small. They were covered in flames as if they were burning fiercely. They exuded an extremely powerful aura. It was obvious that they were a family of 3. What made Lu Yi feel slightly relieved was that although the 3 Moonjade Star Beasts were all Moonjade Star Beasts, their auras were not as strong as the ones he had encountered before. If the one he had encountered before was a late-stage Moonjade Star Beast, then these 3 Moonjade Star Beasts were 2 mid-stage Moonjade Star Beasts and 1 early-stage Moonjade Star Beast. If they could get rid of the late-stage Star Beast, they could naturally get rid of the mid-stage and early-stage Star Beasts as well. Lu Yi immediately accelerated the star boat. This time, after fleeing for several days, they finally got rid of the family of 3. On the star boat, Lu Yi let out a long breath and exchanged a glance with Li Shang. Then both of them looked at the bone sun in Li Shang's hand. If the first astral beast attack was just a coincidence, then the second time allowed the 2 of them to see some clues. After all, both times they encountered star beasts after Li Shang played the bone sun. Did you sense any special power from it? Lu Yi asked. Li Shang shook his head. It seems to be just an ordinary musical instrument. That was true. If this bone sun really had a special power, Lu Yi should have sensed it. However, there was no way to explain the 2 star beast attacks. After all, it was too coincidental. It was easy to verify. A few days later, on a desolate planet, Lu Yi spent a lot of effort to set up a grand formation. Not only that, but his doppelganger was also waiting tens of thousands of miles away, ready to receive him and Li Shang at any time. When everything was ready, Lu Yi looked at Li Shang and nodded slightly. Li Shang picked up the bone sun and played it softly. Although the sound of the bone sun was melodious, it could only travel a limited distance. Lu Yi didn't think that the Moonjade Star Beast they encountered before was attracted by this thing. However, whether it was true or not, he still had to verify it. Otherwise, he wouldn't feel safe with such a strange thing by his side. After Li Shang finished playing the song, Lu Yi looked around vigilantly. When he didn't find anything unusual, he let out a long breath. He vaguely felt that he had been overthinking and that the previous 2 encounters were probably just coincidences. He didn't stop Li Shang and let him play the sun. Li Shang played 3 songs in a row, but it was still peaceful. Lu Yi called out, "That's enough." He was now certain that he had been overthinking things. How could something like this without any restrictions attract the Moonjade Star Beast? However, as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a rumbling sound coming from underground. It sounded like thunder. Lu Ye's expression changed. Just as he was about to investigate carefully, the sound had already reached Li Shang's position. Li Shang's reaction was also very fast. His figure flashed and moved away from where he was standing. The place where he was originally standing was suddenly filled with rubble. A hole suddenly appeared, and a pair of eyes emitted a scarlet light from the hole. Then the owner of the scarlet eyes quickly crawled out. Lu Yi didn't panic because he sensed that it wasn't Yu Yao this time. It was only a late-stage constellation realm star beast. When he looked carefully, he found that this thing looked a bit like a pangolin. It was covered in thick scales and looked very tough. But soon the corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Because behind this pangolin, another pangolin appeared, and then a third. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen pangolins appeared. Armadillo beasts. Li Shang recognized the origin of this star beast. These armadillo beasts were all staring at Li Shang's position. To be more precise, they were staring at the bone sun in his hand. "Throw it to me," Lu Yi shouted at Li Shang. Li Shang immediately threw the bone sun to Lu Yi. When Lu Yi caught it, he found that the armadillo beasts were indeed looking at his hand. He was sure that the Yu Yao star beast from the previous 2 times, and this time the armadillo beasts were all attracted by the bone sun. Lu Yi couldn't help but curse in his heart. What the hell was the Wheel of Fortune doing? Why did it give him such a dangerous thing? Fortunately, he didn't attract any sunshine star beasts. Otherwise he wouldn't even know how he died. That would be too much of a shame. But Lu Yi clearly didn't feel any restriction power from the bone sun. It was just like an ordinary musical instrument. Why would it attract star beast? Unable to figure it out for now, Lu Yi slowly pulled out his mountain pan saber. He didn't have the ability to resist the Yu Yao star beast, but when facing a group of Constellation Realm star beasts, he naturally had no reason to retreat. The mountain pan saber undoubtedly angered the armadillo beasts. Strange beastly roars rang out, and the armadillo beasts immediately pounced on Lu Yi. Lu Yi had no intention of dodging. He raised his saber and met the armadillo beasts head-on. Li Shang pounced and attached his soul to Lu Ye's body, greatly increasing his strength. The mountain pan saber rose and fell and blood splattered everywhere. The armadillo beast's scales were indeed powerful. They were even stronger than body cultivators. Even with the mountain pan saber enhanced by the divine edge, it was difficult to kill them in one strike. At most it could only leave a few wounds on their bodies. Lu Yi had to slash at each armored armadillo several times before he could kill it. He was increasingly aware of the inadequacy of his attacks. The last time he fought Yu Yao of the blood race, the situation was even worse because his attacks were completely ineffective. In the end, if Li Shang hadn't initiated a soul battle and destroyed his opponent's soul, he really wouldn't have been able to do anything to her in that battle. The Divine Edge Spirit Tattoo enhanced the mountain pan saber, but it still wasn't enough. Unfortunately, Lu Yi didn't know how to solve this problem. End of chapter. Chapter 1525. Among those of the same level, Lu Ye's saber was unparalleled. However, the opponents he encountered in the starry sky were not limited to those of the same level. Moreover, even if they were of the same level, the power of some defensive spirit treasures could not be broken so easily. More than a dozen armored armadillo beasts jumped up and down, but they did not cooperate much. They just bit and charged savagely. It was not difficult for Lu Yi, who was in the spirit state, to kill them, but it would take some time. The armored armadillo beasts died one after another, and their blood dyed the ground red. While Lu Yi was fighting, Li Shang's voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Be careful." At the same time, Lu Yi turned around and slashed his saber to the side. In that direction, an armored armadillo beast jumped out of the battlefield and spat out a bronze light at him. Lu Yi did not know what the bronze light was because from the beginning to the end, these armored armadillo beasts did not use any special means, so he did not know why this one was special. But no matter what the bronze light was, it was just a means used by the constellation beasts, so Lu Yi was not afraid. When the saber slashed down, Lu Yi frowned because the saber showed no signs of resistance. The bronze light went straight through the saber and hit his body. Lu Yi quickly constructed the Holy Protection Spirit Tattoo on the surface of his body to block it. Strangely, the Holy Protection Spirit Tattoo could not block the bronze light. The bronze light went straight through the Holy Protection Spirit Tattoo and bombarded his body. Lu Ye's face changed slightly, and in the next moment he felt his body suddenly become heavy, as if a mountain was pressing on his shoulder, making his body stiffen. He was in midair, but now his body fell down uncontrollably. When he looked down, he saw that his body was covered in a faint bronze light, which was exactly the same as the bronze light spat out by the armored armadillo beast. The surviving armored armadillo beasts rushed at him from all directions. Lu Yi wanted to dodge, but his body was so heavy that he could not dodge for a while. With a sizzling sound and a muffled groan, several wounds appeared on Lu Ye's body. He was in a very sorry state. Landing on the ground with a loud bang, the armadillo beasts pounced over like maggots, each of them ferociously baring their fangs, looking ferocious and ferocious, as if they wanted to seize this opportunity to tear Lu Yi into pieces. "Come out." The situation was critical, so Lu Yi hurriedly called out to Li Shang. He couldn't figure out what the essence of this copper light was, but he could feel that it was somewhat similar to Chu Xin's body congealing mirror, but its effect was stronger and stranger. However, no matter what the essence of the copper light was, since it was a foreign object that had invaded his body, he only needed to activate the power of the talent tree to burn it and get rid of the copper light. Li Shang's soul was currently attached to his body. If he didn't let Li Shang leave first, once the power of the talent tree was activated, it was possible that even Li Shang would be burned to ashes. Hearing this, Li Shang immediately tried to remove the soul possession secret technique, but to her surprise she was unable to do so. Under the suppression of the copper light she seemed to have completely merged with Lu Yi. During this moment of delay, the armored armadillo beasts had already rushed over and left several deep wounds on Lu Ye's body. Lu Yi couldn't wait any longer. He was glad that he had made some arrangements here before. Otherwise it would have been troublesome. With a thought, a large array jade pendant appeared in his hand. When he poured his spiritual energy into it, a buzzing sound rang out, and streams of light appeared in all directions. The armored armadillo beasts rushed over, but this time they didn't cause any harm to Lu Yi. A transparent light curtain, visible to the naked eye, appeared around him, and all the armored armadillo beasts were blocked by this light curtain. A protective array. Lu Yi had set up an array here to deal with the Jade Moonstar beast. Of course, an array set up in such a short time wouldn't be much of a threat to the Jade Moonstar beast. He just wanted to buy some time so that he could escape. However, it wasn't Yu Yao who came, but a group of lunar mansions, so this array could play a good role. With the protection of his body, he didn't need to worry about being attacked again. Under the control of the Jade Pendant, Sword Chi began to wreak havoc inside the array. In order to make this array powerful enough, Lu Yi even placed the sword gourd at the eye of the array. It was the only treasure he had that could serve as the eye of the array. The sword chi turned into a river of sword chi, engulfing the armored armadillo beasts. The armored armadillo beasts' scales were indeed tough, but they couldn't withstand such a boundless attack. Soon the sword chi river began to lose its vitality. Lu Yi stared at one of the armored armadillo beasts and urged the river of sword chi to sweep it over. This armored armadillo beast was the one that had spat out the bronze light. The other armored armadillo beasts didn't have this ability, but Lu Yi couldn't see anything special about it. There was nothing special about this armored armadillo beast. It wasn't bigger than its peers and its strength was mediocre. Moreover, ever since it spat out the bronze light, Lu Yi hadn't seen it use a similar technique. Until the river of sword chi engulfed it and strangled it to death, all the attacking armored armadillo beasts were killed. The chaotic battlefield gradually calmed down. Lu Yi stood in place and frowned. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, but his body was too heavy, and every step he took required a lot of strength. This kind of heaviness wasn't real but something he felt. If he was really so heavy he would have left very deep footprints on the ground, but in fact his footprints were very shallow. Is there still no way to remove it? Lu Yi asked. Li Shang's voice came out, a little helpless. No. That's strange. Logically speaking, the bronze light was a technique used by the armored armadillo beast. Now that it was dead, the technique should have lost its effect, but the bronze light kept wrapping around Lu Yi, making him look like he was made of copper. Under the cover of this bronze light, Li Shang couldn't remove the soul enchantment at all. His clone was still tens of thousands of miles away, so Lu Yi didn't rush over because he still had to take back the sword gourd. Moreover, he wanted to see what was so special about this armored armadillo beast. It didn't make sense that they were both armored armadillo beasts, but it was strange that it only used it once. Lu Yi had secretly warned himself not to underestimate the enemy just because their strength was not high, because there were too many strange techniques and treasures in this world, and no one knew if they would fail miserably. He had always been doing this, but he didn't expect to suffer a loss at the hands of a constellation star beast. Days passed, and it wasn't until a few days later that the bronze light shrouding Lu Ye's body suddenly trembled slightly and then dissipated. The moment she regained her freedom, Li Shang dispelled the soul enchantment secret technique and flashed out, a look of lingering fear on her face. She was really afraid that she would have to maintain the soul enchantment with Lu Yi in the future, and if that happened, the two of them would never be able to be separated again. Lu Yi moved his somewhat stiff body and first went to take back the sword gourd before walking over to the special armored armadillo beast's corpse. Previously, under the sweep of the sword chi river, this armored armadillo beast's corpse had become tattered. Lu Yi carefully looked at it and found that there was really nothing special about this corpse, and under the perception of his divine sense, he didn't notice anything unusual. Looking at the other armored armadillo beast corpses, they all seemed to be the same. This was strange. If there was no difference between these armored armadillo beasts, then how could one of them display such a mysterious technique? Even a battle-hardened veteran like him had suffered a great loss. If it weren't for the spirit array he had arranged in advance, he would have had to rely on his doppelganger to take refuge. Somewhat unwilling to give up, Lu Yi dissected the armored armadillo beast corpses one by one and really found a strange object. It was found in the special armored armadillo beast's corpse. Wiping off the bloodstains on it, Lu Yi looked at the object in his hand with rapt attention. It looked like a copper coin, round on the outside and square on the inside with a small hole in the middle. Both sides of the copper coin had extremely complicated patterns that looked like spirit runes but not quite. "What is this?" Li Shang asked curiously. Lu Yi shook his head, indicating that he didn't know, but he faintly felt that the armored armadillo beast's ability to spit out the copper light should have something to do with it. In that case, the copper light wasn't a technique of the armored armadillo beast itself, but the power of the copper coin. So this was the reason why only this armored armadillo beast could spit out the copper light and the others couldn't. This was undoubtedly a treasure. Lu Yi was delighted. He had personally experienced the power of the copper light. Even he, who was struck by the copper light, felt his body become stiff and heavy, let alone the other star mansions. Even Yu Yao's strength would be greatly reduced if she was struck by the copper light. Lu Yi tried to pour his strength into the copper coin, but there was no reaction. He tried again with his divine sense, but there was no effect either. He thought for a moment and handed the copper coin to Li Shang. "Try it." Li Shang took the copper coin and tried it, but no matter what she did, she couldn't make the copper coin react, so she returned it to Lu Yi. "I'm afraid this is a rare treasure." Lu Yi thought so too. It didn't make sense that the armored armadillo beast could stimulate the power of this rare treasure, but it had no effect on him or Li Shang. There was only one possibility, and that was that this was a rare treasure that could only be used once, after which it would lose its effect. Combined with the fact that the armored armadillo beast had only spat out the copper light once, this possibility was very high. Lu Yi couldn't help feeling a little depressed. It was rare to come across such a good treasure, but it was actually a rare treasure that could only be used once. Lu Ye's good mood instantly turned sour, and he couldn't help but sigh. However, what made Lu Yi feel strange was that if this really was a rare treasure, why was it not damaged? Under normal circumstances, a rare treasure that could only be used once would be destroyed after losing its power, but this copper coin was still intact. Although it had lost its power, Lu Yi still decided to put it away because there were many complicated lines on both sides of the copper coin, which might be of some help to him in deducing spirit runes. If he had time in the future, he would study it. End of chapter. Chapter 1526. Stars twinkled in the endless starry sky as the star boat sailed away. Lu Yi sat on the star boat playing with the bone sun in his hand. He was now certain that once he blew it, it would attract the star beasts nearby. He didn't know why the Wheel of Fortune had given him such a thing. Even if it didn't give him a suitable treasure, it could have given him a heavenly phoenix blue crystal. Li Shang had at least given him a decent soul tool. Although the bone sun was strange, as long as he didn't blow it, it wouldn't attract any star beasts. From the looks of it, it was the sound of the bone sun that attracted the star beasts, not the bone sun itself. He had first obtained the bone sun, then the copper coin. Along the way he had obtained two strange things. The long cloud galaxy was quite lively. Many constellations were moving around, and Yu Yao was even there. It was obvious that this galaxy was quite powerful. However, even cultivators from the same galaxy wouldn't easily get close to each other when they met in the starry sky. This was because no galaxy was completely united. There would always be some discord. Therefore, although Lu Yi had met some people, they didn't interact much. Basically, if they saw each other, they would tacitly avoid each other. Nothing happened along the way. Lu Yi and Li Shang took turns to be on guard. When they were free, they cultivated separately. Now that they didn't have a special environment like the 10,000 Elephant Sea, Lu Ye's cultivation efficiency wasn't very high. However, the journey was long, and the accumulation of sand would make a tower. In any case, he had his own unique advantages when it came to cultivation. 6 months after entering the long cloud galaxy, the star boat arrived at a dead star. Lu Yi directly landed on it. Many years ago, this dead star might have been a realm full of vitality. However, for some unknown reason, the vitality died out, and the realm's foundation gradually faded away. Gradually, it evolved into a dead star. There were countless dead stars like this in the starry sky. It was rare to see any signs of life on these dead stars. This meant that this dead star had been dead for many years. According to the star chart the reincarnation tree had given him, if Lu Yi wanted to return to the 9 states, this dead star would be a transit point. The dead star was barren. Lu Yi steered the star boat slowly and released his divine sense to scan the surroundings. "Look over there," Li Shang suddenly said and pointed in a direction. When Lu Yi turned his head to look, he saw a place that looked like a valley. Inside the valley, a small tree that had withered for an unknown number of years stood tall. Lu Yi hastily put away his star boat and sped off in that direction with Li Shang. Soon Lu Yi arrived before the withered little tree. After sizing it up, he nodded and said, "This is it." The fact that this little tree could still stand here after the Death Star's foundation had disappeared for countless years meant that it was no ordinary tree. This was because it was simply a clone of the reincarnation tree. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of years ago this clone had been left behind by the reincarnation tree. However, with the death of the realm, this clone had also died. The reincarnation tree's avatar existed by relying on the realm. There was no life in the realm, so the reincarnation tree's avatar naturally could not survive alone. It was also because the reincarnation tree had left a clone here that it knew some of the mysteries of this dead star. Otherwise, with the vastness of space and the innumerable dead stars and desolate stars, if there were any secrets here, it would have been discovered by cultivators long ago. Lu Yi needed to dig out the reincarnation tree's clone. It would be of great use in the future. The star chart that the reincarnation tree had given him not only showed him the route to return to Jianghu, but also marked some countermeasures. This clone was not an ordinary object. Theoretically speaking, it could be considered a starry sky supreme treasure, just like the relationship between the sword gourd, pill gourd, and the vine of fortune. However, because the reincarnation tree had a large number of clones scattered throughout the entire starry sky, its value was not very high. However, it was still a starry sky supreme treasure and had some very special powers. If it was an intact reincarnation tree's clone, it would not be so easy to dig it out. However, this clone had been dead for many years. It only took Lu Yi a little time to dig it out. After that, he spent a lot of effort to cut the dead clone into pieces and put it away. He then split up with Li Shang and searched around, but he did not find anything valuable. According to the reincarnation tree star chart, there was an abyss about 10,000 miles away from the clone. Lu Yi was looking for that abyss. However, after searching for a long time, he did not find anything. He could only vaguely guess that after countless years, the landscape of the dead star had changed. Perhaps the abyss had been buried. After all, the reincarnation tree's understanding of this dead star was based on the premise that the clone was still alive. The reincarnation tree had no idea what would happen to the dead star after the death of this clone. Since he could not find the abyss, Lu Yi could only dig a hole deep underground. He had to go deep underground. Fortunately, as a constellation cultivator, it was not difficult for him to do this. However, before that, he had to investigate the situation underground to avoid going in the wrong direction. He had to ask Li Shang for help. Her body was in between reality and illusion, so she easily went underground. After investigating, she reappeared half an hour later and brought Lu Yi to a certain spot in the valley. She pointed at the ground and said, "From this direction, it's about 20,000 feet deep. This is a big project." Lu Yi smacked his lips. He took out the Pan Shan saber and soared into the sky. Then he fell headfirst. As he fell, his body spun rapidly. The saber light enveloped his body as if it had turned into a drill. He landed soundlessly, and a deep circular hole appeared in the ground. Amid the biting cold saber light, Lu Yi continued to go deeper underground. He went all the way down like a hot knife through butter. After a full 2 hours, Lu Yi suddenly felt that the ground below him was empty. He had fallen into a huge underground space. Lu Yi put away the Pan Shan saber and looked around. He was not in a hurry to go down. Instead, he went up again. He had to disguise the hole he left outside. Although very few people came here, and even if they did, they might not be able to find the hole, he had to be prepared for all eventualities. Using a formation to disguise himself was not a wise choice. This dead star was barren and did not have the slightest bit of energy. The formation could not be maintained for too long. The best disguise was the most natural cover. Lu Yi busied himself for a while and covered the hole before returning to the depths of the underground space. After arriving at the underground space, Lu Yi followed the passageway that was not very spacious. Basically, he was going downwards. Li Shang was like a fish in water here, her figure appearing and disappearing. After walking for several hours, Lu Yi felt an inexplicable aura in front of him. When he got closer, he found that it was just as he had received from the reincarnation tree. There was a natural insect path here. Insect paths that would appear in a realm were very rare. Generally speaking, insect paths would only appear in the starry sky. Lu Yi did not know why one would appear in this realm. The weakening and deathly stillness of this realm was directly related to the appearance of this insect path. It could be said that the appearance of this insect path led to the death of this realm that was originally full of vitality. In comparison, the entrance to this insect path was not very big. The insect paths in the Wanxiang galaxy were much grander than this one. Moreover, this insect path did not seem to be as stable as the ones in the Wanxiang galaxy. Lu Yi could vaguely see an inexplicable power surging within the insect path. Lu Yi thought for a moment and gave up on the idea of using his physical body to pass through the insect path. He directly summoned the Dragon Emperor. Draconic scales and scarlet armor covered his body. Before that, Li Shang's soul had already attached itself to Lu Ye's body. Looking at the insect path in front of him, Lu Yi took a step forward. The next moment he felt a devouring power pulling him into the insect path. Lu Yi found that this insect path was indeed not very stable. This was because the Dragon Emperor had clearly been under a lot of pressure throughout the entire process. It was unlike the insect paths that Lu Yi had passed through before, where he had basically passed through without feeling anything. A stable insect path would not cause any harm to living beings, but this kind of unstable insect path was hard to say. It was common for people to get lost inside if they were unlucky. Back then, Lu Yi and Tang Jun had been swallowed by the insect path. If not for the void beast's heart core, they would not have been able to escape. Fortunately, although this insect path was unstable, it was not that exaggerated. After a moment, Lu Yi felt his body lighten. He had already walked out of the insect path. His scarlet figure darted forward. When he looked back, the insect path's exit was like the mouth of an invisible beast. An inexplicable power was slowly flowing inside. The fog lingered around, greatly limiting one's vision. Even if he released his divine sense, it could only be less than 3 feet away from his body. Just as the reincarnation tree had indicated on the star map, after exiting the insect path of the Death Star, he would arrive inside a starry sky wonder. Mist Dragon. Because this starry sky wonder, if looked at from a distance, looked like an ancient dragon condensed from fog. That was why it was called this. There was no fatal threat inside the Mist Dragon, but anyone who entered it would not have a good ending. This was because it was easy to get lost and be trapped here for the rest of one's life. Even someone as strong as Ri Guang did not dare to casually enter the area covered by the Mist Dragon. Lu Yi put away his armor and was about to take out something from his storage ring when he heard Li Shang's muffled groan and involuntarily separated from his body. What's wrong? Lu Yi looked at him, puzzled. Li Shang's expression was a little difficult, as if he was resisting an invisible pressure. He turned his head and looked around, then suddenly said, "This is a starry sky wonder?" "Yes." Lu Yi nodded. "No wonder." Li Shang showed a look of understanding. "This starry sky wonder suppresses you?" Lu Yi faintly guessed. Li Shang said, "It's not that this starry sky wonder suppresses me, it's that all starry sky wonders have a strange suppression. This is because starry sky wonders are generally born in the most ancient times. The environment at that time was not the same as now. We are used to living in today's environment, so inexplicably coming to an ancient environment is not something we can adapt to. It's like mortals entering water." "Why am I fine?" Lu Yi was surprised. He did not feel any suppression at all. End of chapter. Chapter 1527. Li Shang looked him up and down. "You participated in the battle for the Spirit Sea with the reincarnation tree, right?" Li Shang had already guessed this when he learned that Lu Yi possessed the mark of the reincarnation tree. This was because the reincarnation tree generally bestowed marks to cultivators who performed extremely well in the battle for the Spirit Sea in the Alpha Origin stage. The reincarnation tree used this method to select the talents it fancied. Since Lu Yi possessed the mark of the reincarnation tree, it was obvious that he had performed extremely well in the battle for the Spirit Sea. "That's right." Lu Yi nodded. He didn't know what this had to do with the battle for the Spirit Sea. Li Shang explained, "The Alpha Origin stage is the birthplace of the reincarnation tree, and is one of the most ancient domains in the world. The spirit light nurtured there has an extremely mysterious power. Not only can it strengthen your foundation after advancing to the constellation realm, but it also gives you the ability to not fear the suppression of most space wonders in the world." "There's such a thing?" Lu Yi was greatly surprised. He had never heard of this before. In the battle for the Spirit Sea in the Alpha Origin stage, the final 100 winners would all be rewarded with mysterious spirit light that would help them advance to the constellation realm. Of course, the higher one's ranking, the more spirit light they would receive. Lu Yi had won first place, so he received the most spirit light. He only knew that the spirit light from the Alpha Origin stage was more effective than the spirit light nurtured in ordinary domains, and could strengthen a cultivator's foundation after advancing to the constellation realm. He was now invincible among his peers partly because of the Alpha Origin spirit light. But he really didn't know that the spirit light had other effects. Yang Qing didn't tell him about this at all. It wasn't that Yang Qing didn't know, but that she couldn't be bothered to tell him. Lu Yi couldn't help but recall something. 2 years ago, when the Constellation Hall opened, he, Pu Ku, and Spectre had gone to the location of the Constellation Hall. When they entered the area, both Pu Ku and Spectre were clearly struggling, as if they were resisting some kind of pressure. Yet he didn't feel anything. Of course, although he felt it was a little strange, he didn't have the time to ask. Only now did he realize that what Pu Ku and Ghost had resisted back then was the suppressive force of the Starry Sky Wonder, and he couldn't feel that mysterious suppression at all. Li Shang continued, "Those who emerge victorious in the battle of the Divine Sea all possess a certain degree of ability to resist the suppression of the starry skies, but the lower one's ranking, the weaker their ability to resist. It is for this reason that even though the battle of the Divine Sea is extremely dangerous, the masters of the various domains are very keen to bring their outstanding juniors to participate. This is because once they emerge victorious, they will have a great advantage in exploring the starry skies in the future." Explore space wonders? Lu Yi was a little surprised. Space wonders were so dangerous, why would they explore them? Li Shang nodded. Although the starry sky wonders are extremely dangerous, it is said that there are many mysterious benefits inside the starry sky wonders. There are even starry sky treasures that have yet to awaken. If one can obtain one or two of these treasures, they can be used as world-stabilizing treasures. Many great figures are keen to explore the starry sky wonders, and some have also obtained many benefits from them. Lu Yi finally understood. Even though the struggle for the Divine Sea had been so dangerous back then, the masters of the various domains had still rushed over like a flock of ducks, each of them bringing their most outstanding juniors to participate. So this was the reason. Compared to the benefits of the mysterious light produced by the Alpha Origin stage, which could strengthen a cultivator's foundation, the experts were undoubtedly more interested in resisting the suppression of the starry skies. Just as Li Shang had said, any cultivator who entered the starry sky wonders would be like a mortal entering water. However, Lu Yi did not feel any pressure. However, Lu Ye's current cultivation was still somewhat insufficient to explore the starry sky wonders. The interior of most starry sky wonders was extremely dangerous, and the Mist Dragon was one of the very few wonders that didn't have any dangers inside. Even so, no one could easily escape from it. Lu Yi took out a fragment of the reincarnation tree from his storage ring. When he raised his hand, a ball of flame ignited in his palm. He brought the fragment of the reincarnation tree close to him. Strangely, the fragment of the reincarnation tree immediately ignited like a torch. The light from the torch illuminated the area within a radius of 30 feet, causing the fog to disperse wherever the light shrouded. If one wanted to leave the Mist Dragon, they would have to borrow the power of the reincarnation tree clone. Only then would they not get lost. Without the illumination of the torch, they would only continue to spin around in the fog. "Follow me closely," Lu Yi said. Li Shang followed closely behind Lu Yi. Lu Yi, who was the leader, didn't know which direction to go, so he randomly picked a direction and went forward. Anyway, as long as they didn't get lost, no matter which direction they went, they would be able to get out. After walking for about half a day, the surroundings were still shrouded in fog. Starry sky wonders were generally incomparably large and could not be casually walked out. However, according to the reincarnation tree's mark on the star map, the Mist Dragon was relatively small compared to other starry sky wonders. If nothing unexpected happened, they would only need 10 days to half a month to leave. After another half a day, Lu Yi suddenly stopped and looked to the front with a solemn expression. Li Shang sensed something was wrong and looked past Lu Ye's figure, his eyes narrowing. There was a figure sitting cross-legged in front of him. It looked like a human, but there was not the slightest trace of vitality on its body. It was unknown how long it had been dead. There was not a single wound on its body, but its face was extremely old, indicating that it had not died from injuries, but rather from being trapped here and dying of old age. Lu Yi and Li Shang both felt a chill run down their spines. Although they knew that the Mist Dragon was a strange place and that anyone who entered would not be able to easily escape, when they really saw someone trapped here until they died of old age, they still felt a sense of dread. If it were not for the guidance of the star map from the reincarnation tree, Lu Yi would never have entered this place. Slowly walking forward, Lu Yi examined the corpse and his expression became even more solemn. "This is Yu Yao. How can you tell?" Li Shang was puzzled. Lu Yi touched the corpse's clothes. "This is a magic artifact-grade robe. However, because too much time had passed and the mist inside the Mist Dragon had some corrosive properties, this magic artifact-grade robe had lost its effectiveness. Lu Yi only needed to use a little force to tear the robe apart. He then looked at the 2 storage rings on the corpse's hand and raised his hand to take them off. Sensing them slightly, Lu Yi found that there was a restriction lock inside. He put them away, bowed to the corpse, and muttered something under his breath. Li Shang listened carefully, only to hear Lu Yi muttering something along the lines of taking your ring, burying your body. Then Lu Yi put away the corpse in front of him, preparing to leave the mist dragon and find a suitable place to bury it. Continuing forward. Since ancient times, many creatures had entered the mist dragon, but most of these creatures did not have good endings. Apart from a few lucky ones who managed to escape, the rest were basically trapped here until they died of old age. Before Lu Yi had even walked out of the mist dragon's range, he had already collected 5 corpses of different shapes and sizes. Some of them sat cross-legged like the first human Yu Yao and died peacefully. Some of them struggled with all their might before they died, but to no avail. A few days later, Li Shang suddenly cried out behind him, giving Lu Yi a fright. Turning his head, Lu Yi saw Li Shang wearing an extremely pained expression, as if he was suffering great torment. His figure flickered in and out of existence, seemingly urging his strength to resist something. "What's wrong?" Lu Yi hurriedly asked. He did not sense any dangerous aura from this side, so he did not know why Li Shang was attacked. Li Shang's expression was one of extreme fear as he shouted, "Soul-devouring aphid, there are soul-devouring aphids here." Lu Yi frowned. He did not know what the hell soul-devouring aphids were that could cause Li Shang to panic like this, but just by hearing the name, he understood that these things were not good and were most likely targeted at the soul. Quickly releasing his divine sense, Lu Yi could not find anything, so he asked curiously, "Where is it?" "It has already invaded my body." Li Shang's expression became desperate. If there was one thing that the soul race feared the most, it would be the soul-devouring aphids in the entire starry sky. These things were simply the nemesis of the soul race. Once, soul-devouring aphids had appeared in the homeland of the soul race and had almost been exterminated. In the end, the masters of the soul race had sacrificed many of their clansmen to suppress the soul-devouring aphids. Lu Yi hurriedly looked towards Li Shang, examining the structure of the spirit runes in his eyes. Observing carefully, he did not find anything unusual at first, but soon Lu Yi noticed something. There were some insects almost invisible to the naked eye inside Li Shang's body. These insects were madly gnawing at her soul body, causing Li Shang extreme pain but unable to expel them. "Enter my divine sea," Lu Yi hurriedly shouted. "No." Li Shang kept shaking her head, causing her ankle-length hair to sway. "The soul-devouring aphids specifically target the soul. Not to mention you are a constellation. Even if it was Rizhao, if I entered your divine sea, I would not be able to escape death. Li Tai Bai, do me a favor if you have the chance to meet other soul race cultivators in the future. Enough nonsense, quickly enter my divine sea, I have a way to deal with them." Hearing this, Li Shang couldn't help being startled, but without any doubt, she jumped into Lu Ye's divine sea with joy. On the calm surface of the sea, Li Shang's figure appeared, and Lu Yi also hurriedly manifested her soul avatar. Strangely enough, when Li Shang entered Lu Ye's divine sea, the soul-devouring aphids that had invaded her body actually took the initiative to separate themselves. Clearly visible, a cloud of black mist the size of a baby's fist floated out from Li Shang's body. This was the convergence of the soul-devouring aphids. Even if one looked at them with the naked eye, it was difficult to distinguish them. Each individual was extremely small, but when gathered together, it was easier to observe. These soul-devouring aphids were like cats smelling fish and rushed into Lu Ye's divine sea, causing Li Shang to be stunned. This kind of situation undoubtedly only explained one thing, and that was that Lu Ye's soul force was purer and stronger than hers, so she could attract the soul-devouring aphids more. Li Shang could not help being a little shocked. One had to know that she was a soul race. In terms of soul force, the soul race was not inferior to any race of the same rank. But now, the reaction of the soul-devouring aphids showed that in terms of soul force, Lu Yi far surpassed her. Otherwise it would not have caused such a change. But immediately after, Li Shang panicked and shouted at Lu Yi, "Don't let them enter your soul sea." End of this chapter. Chapter 1528. Li Shang didn't know what method Lu Yi had to deal with the soul-devouring aphids, but once this kind of strange insect entered the soul sea, it would rapidly reproduce, and what awaited Lu Yi was the exhaustion of his divine sea and the loss of his soul force. In fact, the number of soul-devouring aphids that invaded her body just now wasn't too many, but in just a short while, they had already reproduced into a small group, which showed how strange they were. Lu Yi, however, acted as if he hadn't heard her and just stared at the group of soul-devouring aphids that had rushed into his soul sea. He was still thinking about how to safely and effectively solve Li Shang's problem, but these little insects ran out on their own, saving him a lot of trouble. When the soul-devouring aphids entered his soul sea, Lu Yi immediately felt a heart-wrenching pain. It was the feeling of his soul being torn apart. Under his perception, he could clearly perceive that the soul-devouring aphids were frantically gnawing at the power in his divine sea and quickly dividing into more individuals. In just a short while, the number of soul-devouring aphids had doubled. This thing was indeed very strange. Lu Yi wanted to observe more, but the pain from his soul was really unbearable, so he could only urge the power of his talent tree. In an instant, a strange flame appeared in his divine sea, enveloping all the soul-devouring aphids within it. Enveloped by the flame, the soul-devouring aphids were completely annihilated. Li Shang, who was anxious but didn't know what to do, couldn't help staring blankly at the inexplicable flame, vaguely feeling the great threat it brought to her. Thinking about how she had actually launched a soul battle against Lu Yi and wanted him to set her free, Li Shang felt a little scared. Fortunately, Lu Yi never had any intention of killing her, otherwise when this flame appeared, she would have already suffered the same fate as the soul-devouring aphids. "Are you all right?" Li Shang asked worriedly. "I'm fine," Lu Yi shook his head. His soul was slightly damaged, but he could just refine a soul-refining grass later to make up for it. "Li Tai Bai, can I stay here?" Li Shang asked embarrassedly. She was not timid and her will was very strong, but the soul-devouring aphids were really the nemesis of the soul race. Since there were soul-devouring aphids in the Mist Dragon, she didn't dare to wander around outside. Previously, the soul-devouring aphids only attacked her and not Lu Yi because they were attracted to her soul. Lu Yi noticed her fear and was secretly amused, but he still replied, "Of course." He flashed out of the deity sea and continued forward with a torch in hand. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. The star map given by the reincarnation tree clearly indicated that there was no special danger inside the Mist Dragon. The only danger here was the Mist Dragon itself. How could there be something like the soul-devouring aphids? Of. After walking for a while, another corpse appeared in the light of the torches. Lu Yi wasn't surprised, but when he looked at the corpse, he couldn't help but be startled. Of Yi with soul? Yi of soul? Soul of soul, aphids, of Esav? Taking a closer look, Yang Kai found that the child's body was chubby and she wore a jade bracelet on her lotus root-like wrist. Just as Lu Yi was sizing her up, he suddenly noticed a mass of black mist rising from the child's body and rushing straight towards him. The black mist gave him a familiar feeling. Instinctively, Lu Yi urged his spirit chi to protect himself, but the black mist simply ignored his spirit chi protection and poured directly into his body before disappearing. The next moment, Li Shang's exclamation came from his divine sea, "Li Tai Bai, there are more soul-devouring aphids." Lu Yi hurriedly manifested his soul avatar and saw a mass of black mist condensed from soul-devouring aphids in his divine sea. Without any hesitation, he immediately urged the power of his talent tree to burn this small mass of aphids. Li Shang's face was filled with fear. Why are there more soul-devouring aphids? She thought she would be safe hiding here, but who would have thought she would be so frightened that her face turned pale? "I think I found the source," Lu Yi said, his mind returning to his senses as he looked at the chubby corpse in front of him. If he wasn't mistaken, the source of the soul-devouring aphids was here. This little girl should have been attacked by the soul-devouring aphids and mistakenly entered the Mist Dragon, becoming trapped here. Although the little girl was dead, the soul-devouring aphids were still alive. No wonder soul-devouring aphids appeared in this place, they really were foreign. Lu Yi looked at the little girl's corpse and sighed slightly. No matter what the little girl's true identity was, she still looked like a child. It was really pitiful for her to die in such a place. He raised his hand and grabbed her arm, preparing to collect her along with the several corpses he had encountered before, then find a place to bury her later. But the moment he touched her, Lu Yi felt something was wrong. Squeezing it a little, he found that the lotus root-like arm was still flexible. Although it was cold, it was not the kind of touch a corpse should have. Slightly startled, Yang Kai carefully felt it, and in the next moment, his face filled with shock. This little girl was actually still alive. It was just that her vitality was extremely weak, like a candle in the wind and rain, about to be extinguished at any time. Lu Yi couldn't help but hesitate. If the other party was a corpse, there was naturally nothing to say. He would just collect the corpse and find a place to bury it, but she still had a little vitality. If he left her alone, Lu Yi would feel a little apologetic, but if he wanted to save her, Lu Yi didn't know who she was. If he saved an evil person who was very strong, the gains would not make up for the losses. After a while, Lu Yi clenched his teeth. If he just left her alone, he wouldn't be able to get over it. Since that was the case, he could only try to save her and see if he could save her. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if she really was an evil person, he had saved her life. As long as she still had a little conscience, she wouldn't kill him. Thinking so, Lu Yi quickly took out a spirit pill and stuffed it into the little girl's mouth, then urged his spirit chi to help her swallow and refine it. Swallowing one spirit pill after another, Lu Yi could clearly feel that the other party's vitality was slowly becoming stronger, and the temperature of her body was no longer as cold as before. However, the other party showed no signs of waking up. It seemed that she had been injured for too long and it was difficult for her body to recover. What made Lu Yi even more concerned was that while he was here, a black mist of soul-devouring aphids would emerge from the little girl's body from time to time and pour into his divine sea, but all of it would be burned away by the power of his skill tree. After a long time, under Lu Ye's observation, the little girl's body was basically fine, but she still showed no signs of waking up. Combining this with the soul-devouring aphids, Lu Yi had a guess and his spiritual energy surged and invaded her divine sea. If the other party was in a normal state, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't be able to do this at will, but this little girl had been unconscious for an unknown period of time and had been tortured by the soul-devouring aphids, so her spiritual energy defenses had long since been shattered, so Lu Yi had no difficulty in invading. Looking around, Lu Yi was shocked. What divine sea? This was simply a nest of aphids. The entire divine sea had dried up, without the slightest trace of spiritual energy remaining. Everywhere he looked, he saw a dense mass of soul-devouring aphids, a vast expanse of black. The soul-devouring aphids that had previously harassed Lu Yi had obviously flown out from here. Feeling the aura of Lu Ye's soul avatar, the soul-devouring aphids immediately swarmed over, pouncing on him and wrapping him up in the blink of an eye. Strange flames suddenly burst forth and swept out in all directions, turning large swathes of soul-devouring aphids into nothingness. The flames continued to spread, incinerating even more soul-devouring aphids. After a while, Lu Yi withdrew the power of his skill tree and the soul-devouring aphids could no longer be seen in his field of vision. Only a white cocoon remained standing in the center of the dried-up divine sea. Lu Yi flew forward and carefully examined it, discovering a trace of spiritual energy coming from the white cocoon. Through the hazy white cocoon, he could vaguely make out a small figure curled up inside. If he wasn't mistaken, the one inside this white cocoon should be the little girl's soul avatar. Yang Kai didn't know whether this white cocoon was a soul artifact or a soul secret technique, but no matter what it was, being able to persist under the encirclement of the endless soul-devouring aphids was obviously no trivial matter. Gently knocking on the white cocoon, the figure inside did not respond, so Lu Yi had no choice but to withdraw for the time being. Li Shang's voice rang out in his mind, "Li Tai Bai, what's the situation now?" Lu Yi briefly explained what had happened to him before Li Shang emerged from his divine sea and stared blankly at the little figure in front of him who seemed to be sleeping soundly, a look of surprise on his face as he asked, "Do you know what her cultivation is?" Lu Yi shook his head, "I don't know." The other party's physique didn't seem to be strong, seemingly not even reaching the star constellation realm, but if she could survive in the starry sky, how could she not be a star constellation realm cultivator? Her divine sea had dried up, so it was impossible to infer her cultivation from the situation of her divine sea. "What should we do now?" Li Shang asked. Lu Yi also wanted to know what to do now. He thought he was just going to collect a corpse, but it turned out to be a living person. Unfortunately, he didn't know what her cultivation and temperament were like, which inevitably gave him a headache. Now that the vitality of her body was slowly recovering and the soul-devouring aphids in her divine sea had all been dealt with, there should be no problem for her to survive. It was just that her soul had suffered heavy damage and he didn't know when she would wake up. After hesitating for a while, Lu Yi said, "Let's take her with us." Since he had already saved her, he couldn't just leave her be, so he might as well save her to the end, perhaps he could even form a good karma. Li Shang nodded, took a step forward and picked up the little figure. Lu Yi held the torch and continued forward, followed by Li Shang. After walking for a few more days, the fog in front of them suddenly cleared and endless starlight shone into their field of vision. Lu Yi was overjoyed. They had finally made it out. End of this chapter. Chapter 1529. After flying for some distance, he turned around and saw a vast expanse of fog shrouding the starry sky. The fog condensed into the shape of a lifelike dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. Lu Yi appeared at the dragon's belly. He secretly rejoiced that he had chosen the right direction because the dragon's belly was the weakest. If he had chosen another direction, it would have taken him a lot longer to get out of the dragon's mouth. Lu Yi summoned his planetary ship and prepared to take out some spirit jades from his storage ring to store them in the ship. This way he could conserve his spiritual energy during the journey. However, he suddenly froze and his expression turned to one of shock. He discovered that the spirit jades he had stored in his storage ring were gone. Before leaving the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he had borrowed 50 million spirit jades from the mermaids, and Chu Shen had given him another 10 million. In total he had 60 million spirit jades. However, after purchasing a large number of silver fish and tiger shark warships, he had spent more than half of them. After that, Lu Yi bought a lot of other things, leaving him with about 10 million spirit jades, which he had kept as a backup. He did not store them in one storage ring. Most of them were stored in his space of tattoos. Even so, there were still about 3 million spirit jades in his storage ring. Lu Yi had used some spirit jades along the way but not a lot. The last time he checked, the spirit jades were still there but now they were all gone. Thinking that he had remembered the wrong location, he checked his other storage ring, but he did not find any spirit jades. 3 million spirit jades had disappeared for no reason. This was really strange. He could not say that they had been stolen. Recently, only Li Shang had been following him. Li Shang could not have done such a thing. Besides, how could someone steal something stored in a storage ring? He frowned and used his divine sense to search the storage ring where the spirit jades had been stored, trying to find some clues. With a glance he really did find something strange. With a thought he took out the item. Li Shang glanced at it and was surprised. How did it change? Lu Yi held a copper coin in his hand with a solemn expression. It was the item he had obtained from the armored armadillo beast some time ago. However, it could no longer be considered a copper coin. It was more appropriate to call it a silver coin. This was because this thing had turned silver at this moment, but its shape hadn't changed much. How could Lu Yi know why it changed its appearance? He only vaguely felt that the change had something to do with his 3 million spirit jades. When he obtained the copper coin, he couldn't figure out what it was, so he casually threw it into his storage ring. That storage ring was the one where he put the 3 million spirit jades. What shocked Lu Yi even more was that under his silent perception, he could actually sense an extremely terrifying and restrained power from this silver coin. The terror of that power was at a level that he couldn't even touch. This copper coin was found in the body of the armadillo beast. At that time, Lu Yi felt that the armadillo beast was able to stimulate the strange copper light. It was the power released by this copper coin. However, when he poured his spiritual power into it, there was no response, so he and Li Shang speculated that this thing was a rare treasure that could only be used once. But from the looks of it now, that didn't seem to be the case. This thing was not a rare treasure but a true treasure. However, if one wanted to activate it, they would have to pay a special price. Lu Yi could feel that he could fully activate its power, but if it was really as he speculated, the price would be too great. After thinking about it, Lu Yi took out a spirit jade from his space and placed it on the silver coin. A scene that surprised Lu Yi and Li Shang appeared. They saw the silver light flowing on the silver coin, wrapping the spirit jade, and then the spirit jade turned into a stream of light and was completely swallowed by the silver coin. Li Shang was stunned. What's going on? Lu Yi shook his head. I don't know. The only thing he knew was that this copper coin was definitely an incredible treasure. The 3 million spirit jades that disappeared were all swallowed by the copper coin like this. But if things were really as Lu Yi guessed, then the price of 3 million spirit jades was definitely worth it. The armadillo beast spat out a copper light, and under the suppression of the copper light, Lu Yi, who was at the late stage of the constellation realm, felt like he was carrying a heavy mountain. If it weren't for the spirit array that was arranged in advance, the situation would have been very awkward. But now that the copper coin had turned into a silver coin, if it was activated, then the silver light it shot out would definitely be more powerful than the copper coin. Lu Yi wanted to test the power of the silver coin, but when he remembered that it was 3 million spirit jades, he could only give up. Even with his wealth, he couldn't afford to try it. If 3 million spirit jades could turn a copper coin into a silver coin, then what about 30 million or 300 million spirit jades? Lu Ye's mind was full of imagination, but he really didn't have the ability to test it out. After putting away the silver coin with its terrifying power, Lu Yi activated the star boat and flew into the depths of the starry sky. According to the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree, he should have entered a barren area now. There were many galaxies in the starry sky, but their territories were not closely connected. Therefore, there were many barren areas like this in the starry sky. Generally, these areas were full of danger and didn't belong to any galaxy. Some barren areas were the territory of powerful constellation beasts, some were places where space wonders were located, and some even hid all kinds of undetectable dangers. Of course, there were also some barren areas that were so barren that they didn't even have a decent realm that could nurture life. The greatest danger in this barren area was that there were several space wonders. The Mist Dragon was only one of them, and it was also the least dangerous one. As the star boat sailed forward, Lu Yi kept checking the star chart in his hand to make sure that he didn't deviate from his course. Half a month later, a strange scene suddenly appeared in front of him. In the vast starry sky in front of him, there seemed to be a huge mirror that reflected the scenery in all directions. However, the mirror seemed to be broken with crisscrossing cracks all over it. It looked extremely terrifying. Lu Yi's face lit up with joy because seeing this thing meant that he was on the right track. It was a space wonder, the space-splitting mirror. The crisscrossing cracks on the mirror weren't cracks at all, but spatial rifts. Anyone who entered them wouldn't have a good ending. Standing on the star boat, Lu Yi looked at the space-splitting mirror. Even though he was far away from it, he could still feel the extremely mysterious energy fluctuations coming from it. If he was strong enough, he could definitely try to enter it to comprehend its mysteries. If he could survive, not to mention other things, his attainments in Void Spirit tattoos would definitely improve by several levels. Because Void Spirit tattoos corresponded to this kind of mysterious spatial power. When he and Tang Jun were trapped in the Tunnel of Worms, he had a very deep impression of it. Unfortunately, his strength was too low now, and he didn't dare to enter such a terrifying space wonder. He steered the star boat around the space-splitting mirror. The greatest danger of this space wonder wasn't the spatial rifts that could be seen with the naked eye, but the invisible ones. Affected by this space wonder, the starry sky within hundreds of millions of miles around it wasn't safe. No one knew if they would suddenly run into an undetectable spatial rift. If they were unlucky enough to run into one, if their fleshly body wasn't strong enough, they would die in an instant. The space-splitting mirror was extremely huge. Even with the star boat speed, it took Lu Yi a whole month to fly around it. During this time he didn't see a single living being. Even the low-intelligence star beasts knew to stay away from this terrifying place. After bypassing the space-splitting mirror, it took Lu Yi a few more days to adjust his course and continue forward. At a certain moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction, where he saw a streak of light whizzing by in the distance. It seemed to be in a hurry. It was undoubtedly a cultivator, and judging from the spiritual power fluctuations, he was a late constellation realm cultivator. Lu Yi didn't know which galaxy he came from. Finally, he met a living person. Although the other party didn't seem to have any intention of coming over to greet him, Lu Yi finally felt a trace of vitality in this cold starry sky. Although such a barren land was dangerous, it wasn't a place that no one cared about because the amount of spirit jades produced here was large enough. Compared to competing with local cultivators in their own galaxies, searching for spirit jades in such a place would undoubtedly yield a greater harvest. However, those who dared to come to such a place were basically all skilled and daring people. Lu Yi felt that he had underestimated the courage of the cultivators in the nearby galaxies. After he bypassed the space-splitting mirror, he could see some cultivators passing by in a hurry from time to time. Some of them were alone while others were in groups of 2 or 3. However, after a few days, he vaguely felt that something was wrong, because the liveliness of this barren land had exceeded his expectations. There were a total of 4 galaxies bordering this vast barren land, namely the Quiet Moon Galaxy, the Indefinite Galaxy, the Dark North Galaxy, and the Daluo Galaxy, all of which were marked on the star map. The cultivators coming and going didn't seem to be just looking for spirit jades, but also seemed to be looking for something. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that more than 80% of these cultivators were weapon cultivators. This was because, without exception, they all carried their own weapons with them. This was actually a very strange thing. Lu Yi was used to carrying the Pan Shan saber around his waist so that he could draw it at any time when he encountered an enemy. However, in fact, many cultivators, including weapon cultivators, would keep their weapons in their storage rings so that it wouldn't affect their use in a fight. In particular, some weapon cultivators had extremely large weapons that were inconvenient to carry around. However, the weapon cultivators he met recently, no matter what kind of weapon they carried, were all exposed, and when they flew they would activate the power of their weapons from time to time. Moreover, very few cultivators flew with the help of star boats. They all flew with their bodies. Lu Yi vaguely felt that something must have happened in this area, but after all he was just passing by, so he didn't pay much attention to it. However, he didn't expect that one day, a cultivator would directly fly over after discovering him and shoot a stream of light at him from afar. End of chapter. Chapter 1530. Lu Yi didn't know which galaxy that cultivator was from, so he naturally didn't recognize him. The light beam that the other party shot out wasn't dangerous. It was just a jade slip. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. Just as he was about to ask what was going on, the other party flew away without saying a word, not giving Lu Yi any chance to talk. He frowned and immersed his divine sense into the jade slip to check, but there was only one message inside. 1 month later, at the Heavenly Dog Planet, the treasure will belong to the Fated One. There was a signature at the end of the message. Lu Yi looked at it and found that the person who signed it was called Shenxi Luo. The name was strange and he didn't know if it was a title or a real name. The message was very simple. It seemed to summon him to a place 1 month later, outside of the Heavenly Dog Planet. Lu Yi wasn't a cultivator from the nearby galaxies, so he didn't know where the Heavenly Dog Planet was. Moreover, he didn't want to get involved in this matter. He had only covered 20% of his journey, so he didn't have time to get involved in other things. The person who passed the message to him probably mistook him for a cultivator from the nearby galaxies. The other party didn't know that he had come from the Myriad Phenomenon Galaxy. After putting away the jade slip, Lu Yi continued to rush forward leisurely. However, a few days later he found something interesting. Many cultivators who passed by were actually heading in the same direction as him. Moreover, the cultivators he met this time were all driving star boats. They were heading in a clear direction and didn't travel with their physical bodies. The little girl he rescued from the Mist Dragon was still unconscious. Li Shang was taking care of her, so Lu Yi didn't have to worry about her. On this day, Lu Yi saw a battle in front of him from afar. This kind of battle wasn't uncommon in this barren area. Lu Yi had encountered some battles between cultivators before, and they were extremely lively. However, the scene wasn't big and they were basically one-on-one battles. After all, cultivators from 4 galaxies had come here, so it was impossible for them to coexist peacefully. The situation this time seemed to be different. Lu Yi looked forward and saw a fierce battle. 2 cultivators were besieged by a group of star beasts. He didn't know what the 2 cultivators had done to be so unlucky. Judging from the fluctuations of their spiritual power, one was at the late stage of the constellation realm, and the other was at the early stage of the constellation realm. Beside them was a corpse that couldn't be more dead. There were 5 or 6 star beasts besieging them, and they looked like a group of hyenas. Although they were star beasts, their attacks were quite methodical, and the 2 cultivators were in a more difficult situation. Lu Yi looked off into the distance. Suddenly, his brow arched as he stared at the early constellation cultivator. A look of surprise appeared on his face because he realized that he actually knew this person. Even if it was someone he didn't know, Lu Yi wouldn't mind lending a helping hand and forming a good karma, let alone someone he knew. Just as he steered the spirit ship and sped over, he saw the late-stage constellation realm cultivator suddenly throw out a spirit talisman. Taking advantage of the instant the spirit talisman's power erupted and forced the hyenas back, he leaped out of the battle circle and quickly fled into the distance. He abandoned his companion at the early stage of the constellation realm. He was already in a precarious situation. Now that his companion at the late stage of the constellation realm had left, there was no way for him to survive. A group of star beasts gathered from all directions and opened their bloody mouths to end the cultivator's life. Right at this moment, a streak of silver light shot over and directly knocked away a star beast that was pouncing towards the cultivator. Not only did the powerful impact cause the star boat to shake violently, but the star beast was also split into 2 halves, blood spraying everywhere. The silver light brushed past the cultivator's body and rushed out without losing momentum. A figure jumped out from the silver light. There was a faint sound of a saber, and then saber lights flashed all over the sky. The early stage of the constellation realm didn't realize what had happened. He only knew that a big hand had grabbed his shoulder. Under the guidance of the big hand, he narrowly avoided the star beast's attacks. Once, the hyena's fangs were even an inch away from his neck, making him break out in a cold sweat. By the time he came back to his senses, the arrogant hyena star beasts were all dead. His face was still in shock. He didn't expect that he would still be alive. He finally realized that someone had saved him at the critical moment. Turning his head, he saw a familiar face looking at him with a smile. The cultivator couldn't help but be stunned. He obviously didn't expect to meet Lu Yi here. He was overjoyed. "Brother Lu." "It's been a long time, Brother Du Lang." Lu Yi looked at him with a smile and slowly returned the Pan Mountain saber to its sheath. The person in front of him was Du Lang, whom he met in the Alpha Origin realm. Back then, when he participated in the battle for the Spirit Sea of the Reincarnation Tree, he got to know a group of young cultivators from various realms, but basically, he didn't have too deep of an interaction with them. Only Du Lang and Yu Yaorao stayed with each other for a period of time. The first bucket of gold he dug up in the Alpha Origin realm was thanks to Du Lang. At that time, Du Lang gave him some jade-eating ants, which allowed him to mine the spirit jade lode. Unfortunately, after so many years, Lu Yi didn't take care of those jade-eating ants, and those little things had long starved to death. After parting ways with the spirit jade lode, Lu Yi continued to participate in the battle for the Spirit Sea, but Du Lang withdrew early because he knew that he wasn't strong enough to win. He simply didn't want to take the risk. Lu Yi only knew that Du Lang came from a domain called the Qi Sky Continent, but he didn't know which galaxy this domain was located in. He didn't expect to meet him here. In other words, the Qi Sky Continent was located in one of the 4 nearby galaxies. In this vast starry sky, to be able to meet again after parting ways was also a kind of fate. How did you reach the advanced constellation realm?" Du Lang couldn't believe his eyes. Everyone was clearly only at the Spirit Sea back then. Even though Lu Yi had taken first place, it had only been a few years, but he had already reached the advanced constellation realm, leaving him far behind in terms of cultivation. It was really unbelievable. "I was lucky and encountered some good opportunities." Du Lang naturally knew that it wasn't just a matter of opportunities, but he also instinctively asked in shock. After realizing that something was wrong, he didn't ask any further and said with a surprised expression, "Brother Lu is really amazing." I could tell that Brother Lu wasn't an ordinary person during the battle for the Spirit Sea back then. Looking at it now, Du Lang still have good eyesight. "Who was that just now?" Lu Yi asked. Du Lang should have teamed up with him, but at the critical moment, that person actually abandoned Du Lang and fled alone without even saying goodbye. It was really too much. It's a long story. Du Lang sighed and turned to look at the corpse at the side. His expression was gloomy and he bowed to the torn corpse. Only then did he put the corpse away with red eyes. It could be seen that this dead cultivator was related to Du Lang in some way. They might have been fellow disciples. Seeing that Lu Yi had no intention of dealing with the star beast corpses, Du Lang said, "Brother Lu, if you don't mind, can I take these corpses away?" "Do as you wish." Lu Yi nodded. The star beast corpses were actually quite valuable, especially their crystal cores. However, Lu Yi had experienced great wealth and didn't care much about these things. Du Lang put away the star beast corpses and boarded the star boat under Lu Ye's beckoning. After all, the star boat was only used for traveling. Fortunately, the star boat Lu Yi bought was of good quality, so it wasn't damaged even after the shocking collision. When he saw Li Shang, who was taking care of the unconscious little girl, Du Lang bowed and said, "Greetings, sister-in-law." "Chi Kong." Du Lang greets sister-in-law. He couldn't be blamed for having such a misunderstanding. It was just that Lu Yi and the other two looked too much like a family of 3. When Du Lang greeted them, he muttered in his heart, "I haven't seen Brother Lu for a few years, and his children are already so big. How capable." Li Shang couldn't help but blush when he heard that. However, he didn't explain and just glanced at Lu Yi. Lu Yi quickly said, "Brother Du Lang, you misunderstood. This is fellow Taoist Li Shang." Du Lang looked embarrassed and bowed again. "Fellow Taoist Li Shang, please forgive me. I was too impulsive." Li Shang still didn't say a word. Obviously, he had no intention of blaming Du Lang. "Which way are we going?" Lu Yi asked. Although he couldn't wait to go home, it was rare for him to meet an acquaintance here. It wasn't a problem for him to send Du Lang off. Du Lang's reaction was a little strange. "Brother Lu, don't you need to snatch treasures?" "Snatch what treasures?" Lu Yi was confused. However, he quickly recalled the jade slip he received from Shenxi Luo a few days ago. It said that treasures were for the fated ones. He guessed that the snatching treasures mentioned by Du Lang should be the same thing mentioned in the jade slip. "Brother Lu, you don't know?" Du Lang was surprised and frowned. "Brother Lu, since you appeared here, I thought you were here to snatch treasures. Which galaxy are you from?" I'm from Jade Conch Galaxy, not the nearby galaxies. Jade Conch. Du Lang thought for a while and shook his head. Never heard of it. After all, he was only an early-stage Constellation Realm cultivator. Moreover, it hadn't been long since he became a Constellation Realm cultivator. How would he know about Jade Conch? However, if Lu Yi was from Jade Conch Galaxy, why would he appear here? Du Lang couldn't understand. Which galaxy are you from? Lu Yi asked. Du Lang said, our Qikong continent is located in Indefinite Galaxy. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. What a coincidence. He was going to cross the entire Indefinite Galaxy. According to the star chart given to him by the reincarnation tree, if he wanted to return to the 9 states from the Wanxiang Sea, he had to pass through 2 galaxies. One was Changyun, and the other was Indefinite. In this way, sending Du Lang back was a matter of convenience. He was still worried that an outsider like him passing through the Indefinite Galaxy would cause some trouble. After all, there was a high probability that the cultivators in this galaxy had the means to identify each other. If others treated him as a bad guy, it would be hard to explain. If he was going to pass through Indefinite Galaxy alone, it wouldn't be a problem to be careful. However, in the future he would have to bring people from the 9 states. That would be an entire fleet of ships. It was difficult to guarantee that it wouldn't cause misunderstandings. If he could communicate with the experts of Indefinite Galaxy in advance through Du Lang, these unnecessary troubles could be avoided. End of chapter. Chapter 1531. Lu Yi was actually a little confident in this matter. He did not intend to hide anything from the experts of the Indefinite Galaxy. As long as he could meet the experts of the Indefinite Galaxy and explain to them about the Wanxiang Sea, he believed that they would be happy to participate. No one could resist the temptation of the Wanxiang Sea. It could almost be said to be the center of the entire starry sky. Who would not want to connect with such a place? But this way he would have to bring people from the Qingli Dao world and the Yulua world along the way, as well as the people of the Indefinite Galaxy when he arrived here. The scale of the fleet would definitely be incomparably large. If he entered the Changyun Galaxy again, he did not know if he would arouse the hostility of others. He could only take one step at a time. Lu Yi could not predict what would happen in a few years, but there would always be a way. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Yi asked, Brother Do Lang, what is the status of the Qi Sky continent in the Indefinite Galaxy? Are there any sunshine experts in your world? If there was sunshine in the Qi Sky continent, then things would be much easier. Do Lang shook his head and smiled bitterly. If there was sunshine in the Qi Sky continent, we would not have fallen into this situation today. What do you mean? Lu Yi frowned. It seemed that Do Lang was not living very well. Do Lang sighed. Brother Lu, do you remember what I told you about this domain? Only then did Lu Yi remember that when he was mining with Do Lang did mention the problem of the Qi Sky continent. The foundation of the Qi Sky continent was fading, and the domain was weakening. Therefore he had no other goals in the Alpha Origin stage, and only wanted to mine some spirit jade to see if it could delay the weakening of the Qi Sky continent. In the starry sky there were countless domains. Some were thriving like newborn babies, while others were old and dying like the sun in the west. The 9 prefectures were thriving domains, while the Qi Sky continent was an existence that was completely opposite. The weakening of a domain's foundation would cause many problems, and the group that would be affected the most was the group of cultivators. Within a domain, the upper limit of a cultivator's cultivation was directly related to the strength of the domain's foundation. The Qi Sky continent was once a tyrant. Although it was not at the level of a top domain, it was one of the most powerful domains in the Indefinite Galaxy. There were often 3 to 5 sunshine experts in the domain. However, as the foundation of the realm weakened and the Sunshine Realm cultivators died of old age, the cultivation of the Qikong Realm cultivators was gradually affected. Especially in the last 1,000 years, Qikong's foundation had weakened greatly. Now, the domain could no longer produce spiritual light and allow the deity C to advance to a constellation. If this continued, Qikong's level would continue to drop. Under the slow evolution, the highest level of the cultivators in the domain would continue to be suppressed until there was no spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the domain, making it unsuitable for cultivation. Of course, this weakening would last for many years, and the lives of mortals would not be affected too much. There wasn't a single Rizhao in the crimson skies and only a handful of Yu Yao. It was difficult for a new constellation to be born. This was like the end of the world for the cultivators of the crimson skies. In order to find a way out, Red Sky could only rely on the strongest realm in the galaxy, which was the Unbounded Realm, in exchange for some cultivators to be promoted to the Constellation Realm. This was because the realm could no longer allow cultivators to advance from the Deity Sea to the Constellation Realm. They could only send those who were qualified to advance to the Unbounded Realm to be nurtured. However, there weren't many of these places. Every year, only 3 people could be sent from the Crimson Skies continent to the Unbounded Realm. Whether these 3 people could successfully advance to the Constellation Realm was still unknown. Sometimes, if they were lucky, 1 or 2 of them would advance. Sometimes, if they were unlucky, none of them would advance. For this, Chi Kong had paid a huge price. It could be said that the cultivators of the Crimson Skies continent were living under the Unbounded Realm's roof, acting according to their wishes. This time, Du Lang had joined forces with a senior brother from the Crimson Skies continent for 2 reasons. First, to search for spiritual jade to cultivate. Second, to seek an opportunity. However, they met an unbounded cultivator named Su Dingyang here. It was the late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator who abandoned him and ran away on his own. Du Lang and his senior brother were forcefully recruited by Su Dingyang. The 2 brothers had no choice but to follow him. In the end, they encountered a group of Constellation beasts. They were no match for them and their senior brother died on the spot. Su Dingyang escaped without a trace. If it weren't for Lu Ye's sudden appearance, Du Lang would have died long ago. Lu Ye couldn't help but sigh. I see that this place is a mix of good and bad. Cultivators from all 4 galaxies coexist. If you want to search for spiritual jade, you don't have to come here. Du Lang said, we didn't want to come here either. It's just that the Crimson Skies continent is in decline, and there are cultivators from other realms everywhere. It's extremely difficult to find spiritual jade, so we could only come here to try our luck. Generally speaking, the nearby skies of a realm were where cultivators from the Crimson Skies continent searched for spiritual jade. Cultivators from other realms wouldn't easily enter, otherwise, it would be considered a provocation. However, the Crimson Skies continent's power was too weak now, and they were living under someone else's roof. How could cultivators from other realms care about the feelings of the Crimson Skies continent's cultivators? Even if spiritual jade could be produced near the Crimson Skies continent, it would all be collected by cultivators from other realms. Being forced to come here, Du Lang had no choice but to come here. After thinking about it, Du Lang said, moreover, we didn't come here just for spiritual jade. If we can get that opportunity, even if we can't keep it for ourselves, if we give it away, it will make the Crimson Skies continent situation much better in the future. What kind of opportunity is it? Lu Ye heard Du Lang mention it several times. Even if he wasn't interested, he was still intrigued. But unexpectedly, Du Lang shook his head and said, actually, I don't know what kind of opportunity it is. It's just that since more than 100 years ago, several nearby galaxies began to spread that there was a great opportunity in this barren land. Since then, people have been exploring this place. Lu Ye couldn't help laughing. You don't even know what kind of opportunity it is and you actually came here. Aren't you afraid that the news is wrong? Moreover, it's been 100 years. Even if there really was an opportunity, I'm afraid it would have already been taken by others. Du Lang shook his head seriously. The news can't be wrong. I've asked the elders in this world and they said that this is indeed true. Moreover, that opportunity has always been there and has never been taken by anyone. Lu Ye didn't think much of it. Brother Du Lang, think about it. If there really is such a great opportunity, why don't those Yu Yao and Rizhao take action? The cultivators I've met recently are all constellations. There's no trace of Yu Yao or Rizhao at all. Du Lang explained, I'm not too sure about the specific reason, but the Rizhao and Rizhao of the nearby galaxies seem to have reached an agreement 100 years ago. That is, Yu Yao and Rizhao are not allowed to enter this area except for the constellations. The opportunity here can only be fought over by the constellations of the 4 galaxies. That's why Brother Lu, you can't see Yu Yao and Rizhao. Lu Ye couldn't help but frown. He felt that this matter was somewhat unreliable. Seeing this, Du Lang said, Brother Lu, you're also a weapon cultivator. This opportunity is exclusive to weapon cultivators. Since you're here, why don't you give it a try? With Brother Lu's cultivation you might have a chance. An opportunity that belongs to weapon cultivators? Lu Ye was astonished. Were there factions when it came to opportunities? However, on second thought, 80% of the cultivators he met recently were weapon cultivators. It was indeed a little strange. Moreover, Du Lang wasn't the only one looking for opportunities here. The cultivators of the 4 galaxies were all here. If the opportunity was fake, it didn't make sense for it to attract so many people. This opportunity? Perhaps it really existed. Du Lang sighed. In the end, Qi Kong isn't strong enough. The others should know the truth of that opportunity. Unfortunately, Qi Kong, don't know. Otherwise I could clear up Brother Lu's doubts. Lu Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Who is Luo Shenxi?" Du Lang said, "The overlord of the Daluo galaxy, the Daluo world, is a descendant of Rizhao. In the 4 galaxies he can be said to be the strongest cultivator in the constellation realm. Brother Lu, have you received a message from Luo Shenxi?" Lu Yi nodded. "A few days ago someone sent me a message asking me to go to some heavenly dog planet. We received it before. In fact, that opportunity has appeared several times in the past 100 years, but it has never been obtained. It seems that it has appeared again this time on heavenly dog planet. Luo Shenxi must have found something, but unfortunately he can't solve it. That's why he gathered people. Brother Lu, if you're not in a hurry you can go take a look." Seeing Lu Yi fall silent, Du Lang said, "Heavenly dog planet is just ahead. It won't take a detour." "It's on the way?" Lu Yi was surprised. "Then let's go take a look." Du Lang had also suffered some injuries in the previous battle, so he spent the rest of the time on the planetary ship recovering. Li Shang's voice suddenly entered Lu Ye's ears. "Fellow Taoist, should I call you Li Taibai? Or Lu Ye?" Previously, when she and Lu Yi were dealing with the trouble in the Blue Jade world, there was once a blood tribe constellation cultivator who called out Lu Ye's name. Although Li Shang found it a little strange, he didn't think much of it. It wasn't until Du Lang called him Brother Lu that she realized there was something wrong with the name Li Taibai. Lu Yi looked up at her and saw that she was looking at him with a faint smile. He didn't feel awkward at all and replied through voice transmission, "Names are just code names. Fellow Taoist, you can call me whatever you want. However, my real name is Lu Yi and people call me Lu Yi. I can't help it. Li Taibai is just an alias." He also used to call him Yi Lu Fa Wuzuan. "Why do people call you Lu Yi?" Li Shang was a little confused. Lu Yi said, "In my hometown there's a little thing that can test a cultivator's aptitude. A leaf with 64 leaves is the highest aptitude. When I was tested I only had 1 leaf, so some immoral guy gave me the nickname of Iya. Just like that it spread out." Li Shang was stunned for a while before she suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. She looked like she was overjoyed. 64 leaves is the highest and you only have 1 leaf? This was the biggest joke in the world. Although Li Shang hadn't seen many foreign cultivators, she was sure that no one in the constellation realm was a match for Lu Yi. After all, she had seen with her own eyes how Lu Yi moved unhindered among the blood tribe cultivators. If such a person only had 1 leaf, then there must be something wrong with the little thing that tested his aptitude. End of chapter. Chapter 1532. Li Shang smiled happily, but Lu Yi couldn't be bothered with her. But then again, this was the first time he had seen Li Shang smile after spending so much time with her. The planetary boat continued forward, passing by cultivators who were also rushing forward from time to time. From the looks of it, they were all people who had received Luo Shenxi's summons and were preparing to head to the heavenly dog planet. Lu Yi sensed the power of this star system because there were so many constellations in this barren area, let alone in their own star realm. He didn't know the exact location of the heavenly dog planet, but Do Lang did. Under Do Lang's guidance, they arrived at the heavenly dog planet in about 10 days. From afar it looked like a desolate star, but its shape was a little special. It wasn't a spherical star that was commonly seen in the starry sky. From a certain angle, it looked like a huge dog lying in the starry sky. It didn't look much different from the hyenas that had attacked Do Lang before. Lu Yi guessed that this was probably the origin of the heavenly dog planet's name. He didn't approach the heavenly dog planet because many cultivators had stopped in the void outside the heavenly dog planet. There were at least 300 planetary boats of different shapes and sizes gathered here. It was quite a spectacular sight. There were even more cultivators on their way here. Because there were still some days before the time Luo Shenxi had mentioned, the cultivators here didn't take any substantial action even though they had gathered here. Lu Yi steered the planetary boat to a spacious spot and parked it, then looked around. In terms of the performance of the planetary ship, it was considered to be quite good in this place. However, Lu Yi had considered some problems when he bought the planetary ship. Therefore, judging from its appearance, it looked very plain and unadorned. It was hard to tell if it was good or bad, so it was not very eye-catching. Lu Yi vaguely sensed someone looking in his direction. He followed the gaze and saw that it was from the cultivator named Su Dingyang. He was clearly surprised to see that Dou Lang was still alive, but he only glanced at him for a moment before looking away. At this moment, several figures had gathered around Su Dingyang. They seemed to be cultivators from the Unbounded Realm. Su Dingyang was a descendant of Rizhao, so his status in the Unbounded Realm should be quite high. Which one is Luo Shenxi? Lu Yi asked. Du Lang pointed in a direction and said, "That's him." Lu Yi looked in the direction he was pointing at, and saw an extremely handsome young man dressed in luxurious clothes standing on the deck of a planetary ship, chatting and laughing with the cultivators around him in a relaxed manner. Luo Shenxi, who was known as the strongest person in the four-way galaxy, did not have an overbearing temperament. Instead, he looked very gentle. That planetary ship should be his. The cultivators gathered around him all had pretty good cultivation bases. Most of them were at the late stage of the constellation realm. However, Lu Yi could tell that even though these cultivators were chatting and joking with Luo Shenxi, there was an almost imperceptible sense of restraint in their expressions. Luo Shenxi seemed to have sensed Lu Ye's gaze as he casually glanced over. His gaze paused on Lu Yi for a moment before he nodded slightly. Lu Yi nodded in return. However, to his surprise, Luo Shenxi actually flew out of his star boat and landed directly on Lu Ye's star boat. In the blink of an eye, he landed not far from Lu Yi. With a smile on his face, he said, "Fellow Taoist, you look somewhat unfamiliar. May I know which realm you are from?" Lu Yi did not even blink. "Red Sky." Luo Shenxi shook his head slowly. "No, there is no such person as you in Red Sky." Lu Yi said indifferently, "Fellow Taoist, you are from the Daluo realm, which is very far away from Red Sky. Do you know the cultivators of Red Sky like the back of your hand?" Before Luo Shenxi could react, a cultivator shouted, "Impudent! Just answer whatever young Master Luo asks. Don't talk nonsense." That cultivator was one of the cultivators who had gathered around Luo Shenxi and chatted with him. Lu Yi did not know where he came from, but from his attitude, it was obvious that he wanted to curry favor with Luo Shenxi. Luo Shenxi smiled gently. "Of course I can't know the cultivators of Red Sky like the back of my hand. I'm only interested in the strong. I basically know all the constellation realm cultivators in the four-way galaxy, but I've never seen you before." Lu Yi was puzzled. He was just standing there quietly and did not even activate his power. Why did Luo Shenxi think he was a strong cultivator? He continued to talk nonsense. "I'm in seclusion all year round and rarely go out." Luo Shenxi nodded. "That's more like it. Since you're here, I'll have to ask for your help later. This matter is not easy to solve." After a few simple words, Luo Shenxi quickly left. However, the information revealed by his previous words made many people secretly start to size up Lu Yi. Luo Shenxi was born with a pair of intellect and had a mysterious ability. Since he said that Lu Yi was a strong cultivator, there was an 80% chance that he was right. Unfortunately, no matter how they looked, they could not see anything special about Lu Yi. Time passed slowly, and people continued to arrive on planetary boats. By the time a month was up, the number of cultivators gathered here had exceeded 1,000, which showed how powerful the four-way galaxy was. The cultivators who came were the same as the ones Lu Yi had encountered before. 80% of them were weapon cultivators, and only a few were from other sections. However, they all came with the weapon cultivators, probably to assist the weapon cultivators around them. Luo Shenxi did not waste any time. He leaped out and said slowly, "Fellow cultivators, since you've answered my summons, you must be here for that opportunity. However, if you want to obtain that opportunity, there's a big problem ahead." He pointed at the Heavenly Dog planet behind him and continued, "I'm sure everyone is aware of the situation on the Heavenly Dog planet. It's a nest of star beasts. Not only are there countless constellation star beasts, but there are also 2 moon jade star beasts. Therefore, if you want to enter the Heavenly Dog planet, you'll have to work together and deal with those 2 moon jade star beasts first." If it were not for the 2 moon jade star beasts, Luo Shenxi would not have gathered so many cultivators. When he confirmed that the opportunity was on the Heavenly Dog planet, he would have led people to obtain it. However, it was precisely because of the 2 moon jade star beasts that Luo Shenxi had no choice but to gather people to deal with them. Someone shouted, "We were all gathered here by young Master Luo. Since that's the case, we'll do as you say, young Master Luo." Immediately, many people voiced their agreement. Those who came here were not idiots. Naturally, they knew that the current situation required a leader. The summons had been sent by Luo Shenxi, and he himself was known as the strongest constellation master in the four-way galaxy. It could be said that he was the only one qualified to take charge of these matters. If it were anyone else, it would be difficult to convince the masses. Luo Shenxi did not relent. If that's the case, then I'll do my best. However, I'll make it clear first. Before we deal with those two Moon Jade Star beasts, if anyone dares to back out at the last minute or wait for an opportunity to secretly attack the enemy, then you'll be my enemy. If that happens, then I, Luo Shenxi, will kill you even if you have to flee to the ends of the earth. Everyone voiced their agreement again, indicating that they would definitely follow his orders. Luo Shenxi immediately began to assign people. He clearly had a deep understanding of the cultivators in the four-way galaxy. Even if he did not know everyone, he knew the strength of many late-stage constellation masters. He named them one by one and assigned them various tasks. With so many people gathered together, it was actually not difficult to deal with the two Moon Jade Star beasts. After all, there was strength in numbers. However, there were not only two Moon Jade Star beasts on Heavenly Dog Planet. There were also many Constellation Star beasts. Just dealing with these Constellation Star beasts would require a lot of manpower. Luo Shenxi's arrangements were well organized. It was clear that he was very capable and had a very meticulous mind. Everyone obeyed his orders. Lu Yi did not receive any orders. Just as he was about to relax, he saw Luo Shenxi looking at him. Fellow cultivator, when the time comes, please work with me to kill the Moon Jade Star beasts. Lu Yi heard this and nodded slightly. No problem. Seeing how calm he was, Luo Shenxi was even more certain that Lu Ye's strength was extraordinary. After all the arrangements were made, the operation began. More than a dozen teams flew toward Heavenly Dog Planet from different directions. Each team was led by a late-stage constellation master. The desolate planet's environment was extremely harsh. The sea of clouds below was tumbling and sand was flying everywhere. The dozen teams of cultivators entered Heavenly Dog Planet and quickly disappeared. Even if Lu Yi used his full vision, he could not see what was going on inside. However, after a short while, those cultivators flew out from different directions. Behind them, a large number of star beasts were chasing after them. Those star beasts looked exactly like the hyena star beasts that Lu Yi had encountered before. It looked like this desolate planet was their nest. Most of the teams were being chased by constellation star beasts. There were many of them, and although they appeared to be in a sorry state, they were actually not in much danger. As these teams fled, they would turn around and counterattack, angering the star beasts and luring them into the encirclement that they had set up in advance. However, the cultivators in two of the teams were not in a good situation. This was because the two Moon Jade Star beasts were chasing after these two teams. Judging from their auras, these were two mid-stage Moon Jade Star beasts. Their bodies were also more than a dozen times larger than the average hyena star beast. They were truly ferocious beasts. As they fled, more and more unlucky cultivators were caught and bitten by the Moon Jade Star beasts. No matter how the cultivators retaliated, they were unable to shake them off. Blood splattered across the sky. The terrifying auras of the Moon Jade Star beasts made the constellation masters' scalps tingle. The cultivators in these two teams were unlucky to be chased by the Moon Jade Star beasts. At this moment, Lu Yi was standing beside Luo Shenxi. He was calmly looking at the approaching Moon Jade Star beast. Li Shang hadn't come with him. She was still on the star boat looking after the unconscious little girl. Therefore, she couldn't use Li Shang's soul for this battle. However, Lu Yi didn't need to deal with the Moon Jade Star beast alone. Therefore, he wasn't too worried. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people present, he would have liked to test the power of the silver coin. Although it had devoured 3 million spirit jades, there were some things that he wouldn't know the result of unless he tried. Those who had ambushed the Moon Jade Star beast were all hiding in a concealment formation. This formation had been set up by a formation cultivator, so there was no need to worry about being discovered by the star beast. Moreover, star beasts generally had low intelligence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been lured out so easily. End of chapter. Chapter 1533. In the blink of an eye, one of the groups of cultivators lured a Moon Jade Star beast into the formation, and they all panicked. This group originally had more than a dozen people, but only 5 of them survived. The others were all killed by the Moon Jade Star beast as they fled. Even late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators would find it difficult to withstand a single attack from this beast. Even if they didn't die, they would be crippled. The formation's power was instantly activated, and many dazzling rays of light shot toward the Moon Jade Star beast. Not only that, but the cultivators lying in ambush also used their own techniques to attack the Moon Jade Star beast. Lu Yi was among them. He slashed out several crescent-shaped saber rays, displaying the strength of a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator. The Moonjade Star Beast clearly didn't expect to be ambushed by so many people. It was caught off guard and suffered a loss. It roared angrily, and its huge body rampaged through the formation without restraint. In an instant, the cultivators were thrown off their feet. Wherever the Moonjade Star Beast went, the cultivators there would suffer. On the other side, the second Moonjade Star Beast encountered the same situation. The two battlefields were in full swing and the battle was extremely intense. On the other hand, the cultivators who only needed to deal with the Moonjade Star Beast had it easier. Firstly, the Moonjade Star Beast's strength was limited, and secondly, there were many cultivators. Hence, compared to the two battlefields where the Moonjade Star Beasts were fighting, the cultivators' battlefields were relatively stable. As long as they fought steadily, they would be able to eliminate all the Moonjade Star Beasts. The cultivators in the two battlefields were having a hard time. The Moonjade Star Beast's intelligence was indeed quite low, but the Moonjade Star Beasts were still Moonjade. Whether it was in terms of strength or physique, they were far superior to the Constellation Realm cultivators. Even with the help of the formation they had set up beforehand, the situation was still extremely dangerous. Every now and then, someone would be injured and occasionally someone would die. Luo Shenxi lived up to his reputation as the strongest Constellation Realm cultivator in the Four-Way Galaxy. He brandished his golden spear with peerless might. Moreover, he was extremely nimble and often managed to catch the Moonjade Star Beast off guard and leave a few wounds on it. Lu Yi watched silently. He had a vague feeling that if Luo Shenxi had participated in the Constellation Palace back then, it wouldn't have been a problem for him to enter the top 100. This guy was quite strong. Although Luo Shenxi could injure the Moonjade Star Beast, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. He also encountered the same problem that Lu Yi had encountered when he fought Xuehao. The Moonjade Star Beast's physique was too strong. His injuries didn't affect it much. Instead, they angered the Moonjade Star Beast. The situation was very disadvantageous for the cultivators, but none of them chose to back down. The opportunity was right before them. As long as they could deal with the two Moonjade Star Beasts, they would have a chance to obtain it. This was the best opportunity that they had come across in the past century. Lu Yi was still unhurriedly slashing out his own blade aura. The power was not bad, but it was hard to say how effective it would be. It was not that he was afraid of death, but in this environment he was fighting alone. Without the convenience of others, he naturally had to be more careful. The others, including Luo Shenxi, all had familiar seniors and juniors working together. Even if they couldn't form a formation, they were still well versed in the art of cooperation. They could cover each other's attacks or retreat. As for those who could form a formation, it was needless to say. Whether it was attacking or protecting themselves, they were better than the other cultivators. Lu Yi even had the leisure to check out the situation on the other battlefields. He saw Du Lang and a group of Constellation cultivators attacking the Constellation Star Beasts. Although Du Lang wasn't very strong, he didn't stand out among the crowd. As long as he was careful, he should be fine. He also saw that the situation on the other battlefield where the Moonjade Star Beasts were fighting was worse than his. He had Luo Shenxi on his side. He alone shared about 20% of the pressure, so the situation was much better. However, the other battlefield didn't have such a strong person. The entire battlefield was very chaotic. The Moonjade Star Beasts were rampaging, and several people had already died in battle. As he was observing, Lu Ye's expression suddenly became solemn as he stared forward, only to see a huge figure pouncing towards him, its maw wide open, releasing a strong suction force from it. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know why he was so unlucky as to be targeted by the Moonjade Star Beast. He had only been hiding on the side, unleashing his saber rays. However, after thinking about it, this shouldn't be his bad luck. The Moonjade Star Beast also knew that it had to pick on the weak. Everyone else had companions, but he was all alone. If the Moonjade Star Beast didn't target him, who else would it target? Lu Yi hurriedly dodged. He didn't know what kind of powerful suction force was coming from the Moonjade Star Beast's mouth. Although it couldn't suck Lu Yi into its mouth, it was clearly affecting his movements. Lu Yi finally understood why some people were so weak but couldn't even withstand a single blow from the Moonjade Star Beast. It turned out that this was the reason. He forcefully circulated his spiritual power and narrowly avoided the Star Beast's bite. However, before he could stabilize himself, he felt a sense of danger behind him. Lu Yi didn't even need to look to know that the Star Beast was chasing after him. He had no choice but to continue dodging. Luo Shenxi's eyes lit up and he shouted, Good job, fellow Taoist. You've restrained it like this. As he spoke, his golden spear trembled and shot out like a dragon, piercing into the star beast's body. However, the spear only pierced half a foot into the star beast's flesh. It couldn't cause any effective damage to the star beast. The others also took advantage of this opportunity to use their powerful techniques. The star beast's body was covered in blood. It looked extremely miserable, but in fact, it only stimulated its ferocious nature. The star beast roared and its movements became faster and faster, as if it wouldn't stop until it killed Lu Yi. Lu Yi secretly cursed his bad luck. Although he was agile, he had no problem delaying the star beast for a short period of time. However, if the battle dragged on, even the slightest mistake could lead to his death. Seeing that the star beast really only had eyes for him, Lu Yi didn't dare to hesitate and rushed in a certain direction. In that direction, there were several cultivators from the same sect who had formed a formation. It looked like they were in a good position. Seeing Lu Yi rushing towards them, the leading cultivator's expression changed and he angrily shouted, "Scram!" As he spoke, the curved blade in his hand slashed down. As he circulated his spiritual power, the curved blade suddenly shone brightly and a huge blade shadow appeared. He had used his full strength. If Lu Yi had come from another realm, this person wouldn't have been so ruthless in front of so many people. However, Lu Yi had mentioned Qi Kong's origin before, so this cultivator didn't have any scruples. The cultivators in the four-way star system all knew about Qi Kong's situation. Could be said that Qi Kong was the weakest realm in the four-way star system. If he killed it, then so be it. No one would come looking for trouble. The huge blade shadow descended. The cultivator didn't even have time to see what would happen to Lu Yi. The curved blade in his hand danced wildly, covering the moon jade star beast that was charging towards them. Although they had formed a formation and were able to display strength beyond their own, they still weren't strong enough. The moon jade star beast crashed into them, shattering the blade light. Several figures were sent flying, each of them coughing up blood. The formation collapsed on its own. The star beast wanted to kill them all, but Luo Shenxi had already rushed over, saving them in the nick of time. The cultivators and the four-way star beast attacked together, causing it to roar continuously. Lu Yi finally experienced the true might of the Yu Yao star beast. Although he had killed a few Yu Yaos before, he had always taken advantage of the opportunity to do so. Basically, he had always relied on external forces, either launching a sneak attack to severely injure his opponent, or using some special technique to suppress his opponent. He had never faced a Yu Yao head-on like this before. This time he finally witnessed Yu Yao's strength. This was only a star beast and it didn't look like anything special. Many cultivators from the four-way star systems worked together, yet they couldn't do anything to it even after expending so much effort. The difference in strength was too great. The others also realized how difficult it was to deal with this star beast. At this point, many people had already been injured and a few unlucky ones had even died. Seeing the star beast become more and more ferocious, they couldn't help but think of retreating. Luo Shenxi noticed this and he shouted, "Hold on! Don't let your guard down." With his shout, even those who were thinking of retreating found it difficult to do so. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the better. As the constellation star beasts continued to die, more and more cultivators joined in the battle against the two moon jade star beasts. One had to realize that Luo Shenxi had gathered almost 1,000 people. These people were all constellation cultivators, and there was no lack of late-stage constellation cultivators among them. On average, there were several hundred people attacking one moon jade star beast. No matter how great the difference in strength was, the moon jade star beast still couldn't resist. The two battlefields in the galaxy became more and more lively. As more and more people joined in, the situation of the two moon jade star beasts became more and more dire. Even if the constellation cultivators couldn't do much damage to them with so many people, it was a perfect example of how many ants could kill an elephant. No matter how low the moon jade star beast's intelligence was, they still had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When they sensed that something was wrong, they immediately turned around and fled towards Heavenly Dog. Wherever they went, no one dared to stop them. A fierce look flashed across Luo Shenxi's eyes. He knew that this was the only way to kill the two moon jade star beasts. So many people had paid such a huge price to force the moon jade star beasts into this situation. If they failed, then all their previous efforts would be in vain. He immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivators, if we don't fight now, when are we going to fight?" As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and summoned a red light. He desperately gathered his spiritual power and poured it into the red light. A powerful aura was released from the red light. Lu Yi turned around and immediately recognized that the red light was a red talisman. However, judging from its aura, it wasn't a talisman from the humanoid tribe. It was just an ordinary red talisman. Therefore, although this red talisman was refined by a sunshine cultivator, when Luo Shenxi activated it as a constellation cultivator, its power would be reduced. It wasn't like the humanoid tribe's red talisman, which could be nourished by the humanoid tribe. As time passed, it would become more powerful. For example, when Lu Yi activated the red talisman as a cultivator in the early constellation realm, he killed Yu Yao with a single attack. Now that he was in the late constellation realm, and the red talisman had been nourishing in his body for several years, if he really activated it, he would be invincible under the sunshine cultivator. As for whether he could hurt the sunshine cultivator, the chances were slim. Seeing that Luo Shenxi had even taken out such a precious treasure like the red talisman, the others who had a similar background were no longer stingy. They all used their own methods. End of chapter. Chapter 1534. From this, one could see the benefits of having a leader in such a situation. Luo Shenxi shouted, and many people immediately came to his aid. One after another, rare treasures of various shapes were summoned. As their spiritual power surged, colorful lights began to bloom, enveloping the two fleeing star beasts. The power of heavenly treasures was generally much higher than other treasures of the same quality. This was because heavenly treasures were treasures that could only be used once. No matter who obtained one, they would treat it as their trump card and would not use it easily. However, no matter how valuable a rare treasure was, it was still no more valuable than a red talisman. Since Luo Shenxi had even used a red talisman, how could the cultivators with rare treasures be stingy with their own? This round of attacks was quite effective. The two Yu Yao star beasts were both heavily injured, and their movements had slowed down. Their auras had also decreased, and one of the Yu Yao star beasts had even lost its tail, causing it to bleed. At this moment, the red light in Luo Shenxi's hand suddenly bloomed, transforming into a shocking attack that slashed toward one of the fleeing Moon Jade star beasts. The might of this attack was almost at the level of a mid-stage Moon Jade star beast. The star beast that he had targeted was already heavily injured from the encirclement, so it had no time to dodge this attack. Suddenly, a moonlight appeared on the star beast's body, enveloping it like flowing water. This was clearly a self-defense technique. However, this method was not very effective against the red talisman's attack. The moonlight was broken and a huge wound appeared on the astral beast's back. Through the wound, one could clearly see the squirming innards. This attack had almost cut the astral beast in half. However, it was still not dead. As if it knew that it was doomed, it actually turned around and charged back. Kill? Luo Shenxi shouted. Many cultivators attacked together, quickly killing the star beast on the spot. However, the crowd watched helplessly as the second star beast fled in a sorry state. That star beast was also heavily injured, but it still managed to escape. Even if someone tried to stop it, they could not stop it. Many cultivators had died in this battle, yet only one of the two lunar star beasts had been killed. And this was under the premise that Luo Shenxi had paid the price of a red talisman. Such a result was definitely not a passing grade. However, since it had come to this, everyone could only accept it. At the end of the day, even if these 1,000 people had come in response to the summons, they were still a sheet of loose sand. If they really came from the same sect and worked together, they would still be able to slay the two Yu Yaos of the 1,000-star mansion. After the battle, some people immediately flew in the direction of Heavenly Dog. Even though one of the Moon Jade star beasts had escaped, they were severely injured, so it was hard to say how much of their strength they could still unleash. Thus, there was nothing to be afraid of. Now that the biggest obstacle had been cleared, the cultivators naturally couldn't wait to head to the Heavenly Dog planet in search of opportunities. A large number of cultivators left, and Luo Shenxi sat cross-legged to recover. Activating the red talisman had consumed a lot of his spiritual power. There were a few figures standing beside him, and they should be Luo Shenxi's peers. One of them looked at the departing cultivators and harumphed coldly. A motley crew. It was clear that they didn't want to hide anything from the other cultivators. Based on their performance just now, it was certain that many people had been holding back. If more people had summoned their rare treasures, then the second star beast might not have had the chance to escape. Luo Shenxi had even used his red talisman, yet these people were still unwilling to part with a rare treasure. This was naturally infuriating. However, another person chuckled softly and said, "It's hard to fathom a person's heart. There's no need to force it. Besides, this is a good thing for us." The person who spoke earlier frowned. "How is it a good thing that Yu Yao is still alive?" That person said, "Even though that Yu Yao isn't dead, she's severely injured. Even if we accidentally run into her, she won't be much of a threat. However, if the others run into her, they were all very powerful and they even had someone like Luo Shenxi with them. If they really ran into the severely injured Yu Yao, they would indeed be able to put up a fight. However, the others didn't have their trump cards." The cultivator who spoke earlier suddenly came to a realization. So that's how it is. His gloomy mood was instantly swept away. Even though the cultivators from the 4 galaxies had been working together earlier, once they entered Heavenly Dog Planet, unless they were from the same realm, they would all be enemies. If they could eliminate more opponents, then their chances of obtaining the Star Beast would also be higher. While Luo Shenxi was still recovering, Lu Yi had already arrived at Heavenly Dog Planet on his Star Beast with Li Shang and Du Lang in tow. They charged into the thick clouds and looked down from above. The environment on Heavenly Dog Planet was extremely harsh. Aside from Star Beasts, no other living beings could survive on such a desolate planet for long periods of time. Lu Yi had been curious as to why a Star Beast would treat a desolate planet as its lair. However, when he arrived, he discovered that this desolate planet was somewhat special. There were huge craters everywhere on Heavenly Dog Planet's surface. The depth of each crater was unknown, and the insides were pitch black. There were countless such craters on the entire surface of Heavenly Dog Planet. Du Lang stood beside Lu Yi and explained, "The interior of Heavenly Dog Planet is like a beehive. The terrain is extremely intricate and complex. That Moon Jade Star Beast must have fled back. No one knows where it is hiding. Brother Lu, you have to be careful." Lu Yi nodded and carefully observed this desolate planet from above. He vaguely felt that this desolate planet's shape resembled a huge heavenly dog. It wasn't just a simple resemblance. This was because he had seen similar realms before. When Lu Yi first arrived at the Blood Refinement Realm, he felt that the Blood Refinement Realm was like the body of a female giant with her head and limbs cut off. In the end, it was confirmed that it was indeed the body of a female giant. However, she had died many years ago and no one knew who killed her. After her death, her body turned into a realm. If Heavenly Dog Planet's situation was the same as the Blood Refinement Realm, then didn't that mean that this was also a realm formed by the corpse of an extremely powerful star beast? The Blood Refinement Realm gave birth to the Blood Clan, while Heavenly Dog Planet gave birth to the Heavenly Dog Star Beast. The two had many similarities. If that was the case, it was understandable that the Heavenly Dog Star Beast used this place as its nest. This was the place that gave birth to them. There were no traces of other cultivators. Those who came here had already entered the underground through the holes on the surface. Lu Yi was very curious about what kind of opportunity could be considered a unique opportunity for a weapon cultivator. Originally, he didn't want to get involved. However, due to various coincidences, since he was already here, there was no harm in joining in the fun. As for the Lunar Jade Star Beast that had escaped, Lu Yi naturally wasn't afraid of it. Lu Yi steered the star boat to a random hole. He put away the star boat and took the lead to enter. Du Lang and Li Shang, who were carrying the little girl, followed closely behind. After descending for nearly 10,000 feet, they finally reached the bottom of the hole. The bottom wasn't completely sealed. There were passages in all directions. Just as Du Lang had said, the interior of Heavenly Dog Planet was like a complicated beehive. Lu Yi didn't know which direction to go, so he randomly chose a direction and led the way forward. As he walked, he looked around. There were forks in the path from time to time. Lu Yi went straight ahead without any pattern. Soon he discovered a problem. Inside Heavenly Dog Planet, his divine sense was greatly suppressed and could only extend about 10 feet from his body. This made him feel a little strange because he did not sense any strange power from this place. It was understandable that the mist dragon suppressed his divine sense. After all, it was a starry sky wonder, but what was so strange about the interior of the Heavenly Dog Star? Gradually, Lu Ye's expression became bewildered, because he found that this passageway didn't seem to be a simple passageway. Combining this with his previous conjecture about Heavenly Dog Planet, Lu Yi was shocked. Could these passages be blood vessels? The passages were large and small and there were many forks. The more forked the passages were, the smaller they were, very much like blood vessels. Occasionally he could hear some sounds of fighting, but because the passages were complicated, Lu Yi couldn't tell where these sounds were coming from. After walking for a while, they suddenly entered a relatively spacious space. However, inside that space, pairs of scarlet eyes suddenly lit up and stared straight at Lu Yi and the others. Immediately after, the roars of beasts could be heard as heavenly dog star beasts pounced. Lu Yi sensed that these star beasts weren't very strong. The strongest was only at the constellation realm, and some were only equivalent to divine sea and true lake realm star beasts. Naturally, he didn't take them seriously. The mountain pansaber's saber flashed a few times and killed these star beasts. As they continued forward, they encountered some heavenly dog star beasts from time to time. However, they weren't very strong and could be easily dealt with. However, Lu Yi discovered something interesting. These heavenly dog star beasts seemed to have some special abilities here. They could perfectly hide themselves and were difficult to detect before they launched a sneak attack. There were several times when Lu Yi only noticed when the star beasts launched their attacks. This was obviously not an ability of the heavenly dog star beasts. There was a high chance that the special environment of this place gave them this ability. After all, this was the place where they were born. It wasn't surprising that they could display some special abilities here. Occasionally, there would be sounds of fighting coming from all directions. It was obvious that those cultivators were fighting. However, after walking for so long, Lu Yi didn't encounter any cultivators. Luo Shenxi had gathered more than 1,000 cultivators. Even though there were casualties in the previous battle, there were still 800 to 900 people who entered the Heavenly Dog Star. So many people, but they didn't encounter each other. It was obvious that the internal environment of this place was complicated. Lu Yi searched for 2 consecutive days. Besides encountering some constellation heavenly dogs, he didn't find anything else. If this continued, Lu Yi estimated that he might not find anything even if he searched here for a few months. After thinking carefully, if the opportunity was really on the Heavenly Dog Star, it should be in a more special place. For example, where the heart was. Or where the brain was. When he thought of this, Lu Yi felt that he had a direction. It wasn't difficult to reach the location of the heart. He just had to follow the largest passage all the way. Lu Yi remembered that he entered the Heavenly Dog Star from the direction of the spine. Therefore, it shouldn't be far from the location of the heart. End of chapter. Chapter 1535. Although Lu Yi was unsure of the exact location of the heart, if his previous speculation was correct, as long as he followed the largest passage, he would be able to reach the heart. Sure enough, a day later Lu Yi and the others suddenly entered a huge chamber. This chamber was much larger than any of the spaces he had encountered before, and its shape was very strange. If one examined it carefully, it really did look like a giant heart. Unfortunately, Lu Yi did not find anything special here. However, there were traces left behind by others because there were some heavenly dog star beast corpses here. After searching for a while, Lu Yi was about to go back when his figure suddenly paused and looked ahead with rapt attention. Li Shang seemed to have noticed this and also stopped. Although Du Lang did not know what had happened when he saw Lu Ye's posture, he knew the situation was not good, so he secretly urged his spirit qi and became alert. The sound of footsteps suddenly came from the front, followed by several figures. It seemed that there were many people who had the same idea as Lu Yi. Some people had come to explore this place before and now there were more. A moment later they met face to face. The leader of the 3 was first stunned when he saw Lu Yi and then became angry. "It's you." As he spoke, Lu Yi also recognized these 3 people. Although he did not know the origins of these 3 people, they had all joined forces to fight against one of the Jade Moonstar beasts. At that time, Lu Yi was alone and was targeted by the Jade Moonstar beast. He had no choice but to escape, and while hiding he borrowed the strength of these 3 people to block the Jade Moonstar beast. Because these 3 people were from the same sect, they were able to form a powerful battle array. As it turned out, these 3 people's battle array was quite good. Although the battle array was broken by the Jade Moonstar beast's brutal charge, there was no danger to their lives. Later, with Luo Shenxi's timely support, there were no casualties. At that time, Lu Yi had no choice but to do so, but for these 3 people, Lu Yi was the perfect scapegoat. So, at that time the leader did not hesitate to cut down Lu Yi, but in the end he could not do anything to Lu Yi. The past was the past. Now that everyone was exploring the Heavenly Dog Star, it would have been fine if they had not encountered Lu Yi, but since they had, they naturally did not treat Lu Yi well. After recognizing Lu Yi, the 3 men's faces were filled with hostility. The leader even summoned his curved blade, his spiritual energy surging fiercely as he made no attempt to hide his murderous intent. Do Lang's expression changed. "Yujin, what do you mean?" Lu Yi did not know these people, but Dou Lang did. This was because they were all from the indefinite galaxy. Eugene and the others came from a very powerful domain. These people were all very powerful, especially in this situation. They could even form a matrix. If they really fought, Dou Lang felt that his side would not be a match for them. Eugene's expression was indifferent. Since you're already here, don't ask such a childish question. He slowly raised his scimitar and pointed it at Lu Yi. Let's settle the score from before. Lu Yi suddenly floated back, distancing herself from them. Even as she floated back, she urged her spiritual power to wrap around Li Shang and Dou Lang as well. When Eugene saw this, he thought that Lu Yi was afraid of him. His eyes were filled with contempt. No wonder Qi Kong ended up like this. He's just a bunch of cowards. Dou Lang clenched his fists, but he did not dare to refute. This was because he knew that if he did not provoke the other party, he might still have a chance to live. However, if he really angered the other party, he would definitely be killed. If he was killed here, no one would uphold justice. Be careful. Lu Yi suddenly said. Eugene was stunned. What? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a great danger behind him. Then a strong smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. When he hurriedly turned his head to look, he saw that a huge figure had unknowingly appeared in the shadows. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at the two fellow disciples standing behind him. Eugene turned pale with fright and quickly shouted, "Dodge!" However, it was still too late. When the bloody mouth closed, there was a scream. The sound of chewing and bones breaking could be heard at the same time. The two auras were instantly annihilated. Eugene's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He did not expect to be so unlucky as to encounter the injured Moonjade Star Beast. This Star Beast had been hiding here all this time, but they did not notice it when they arrived. At this moment, the heavily injured Moonjade Star Beast was standing 10 feet behind him. It was savagely chewing as blood flowed from the corner of its mouth. Eugene reacted quickly. He knew that he was no match for this Star Beast, so he rushed forward. However, the Moonjade Star Beast was even faster. A black shadow suddenly appeared behind it. Eugene's body stiffened. He looked down with difficulty and saw an arrow-like object piercing through his chest. The Moonjade Star Beast's aura and vitality still lingered on it. It was its tail. Save. Eugene looked at Lu Yi in despair. He reached out to grab him as if he was trying to grab hold of a life-saving straw. The Moonjade Star Beast's tail shook like an arrow and pulled Eugene back. It threw him into its mouth and chewed. In the blink of an eye, 3 constellations died. Dou Lang's scalp was numb. He only participated in attacking the Constellation-class Star Beasts. He did not face the Moonjade Star Beast directly. Only now did he realize how terrifying the Moonjade Star Beast was. And this was just a heavily injured Moonjade Star Beast? He finally understood why Lu Yi suddenly stopped. Dou Lang thought that Lu Yi had sensed the arrival of Eugene and the others. Now, it seemed that Lu Yi had sensed the hidden Moonjade Star Beast. The arrival of Eugene and the others was just an accident. Now that Eugene and the others were dead, the 3 of them were trapped in the heart chamber. They would soon follow in Eugene's footsteps. Knowing that he was going to die without a doubt, Dou Lang was not so nervous. His entire body relaxed. For the past few years, he had been living under someone else's roof and acting according to their wishes. His days had been very depressing. It did not seem unacceptable to die like this. In front of Dou Lang, Lu Yi looked at the Moonjade Star Beast and secretly assessed his current strength. He felt that it was better not to take the risk. Although he had the buff of deathly possession, and if he went all out, he might be able to fight against the Moonjade Star Beast. However, this Star Beast was still at the middle stage of the Moonjade Star Beast. Although it was heavily injured, it was even more ferocious. Fighting with such a Star Beast in such a narrow space was not a wise decision. Thinking of this, Lu Yi silently took out his money. Whether or not this thing was as powerful as he thought, he had to try it out to find out. The Moonjade Star Beast was still not satisfied after eating Eugene and the others. It roared in Lu Ye's direction and pressed down on him like a mountain. However, a silver light suddenly bloomed from Lu Ye's hand and shot toward it. The astral beast was unlucky. It was actually very fast. If they were in the vast starry sky, the silver light might not have been able to hit it. However, the cramped environment restricted its movements. When it saw the silver light, the astral beast had already intended to dodge. However, due to the limited terrain, it was unable to do so. The silver light hit its lower abdomen, but it did not cause any damage. However, the star beast looked as if it had been struck by lightning. Its vigorous body suddenly became incomparably heavy, and it fell to the ground with a loud boom. The silver light on its lower abdomen spread out like mercury, and in the blink of an eye, it was enveloped in a layer of silver light. From afar, it looked like a giant beast made of silver water. It maintained its posture with its front claws extended. Its sharp claws were trembling slightly, as if it was resisting some kind of power. However, it was unable to break free. Its eyes had turned blood red, and they were filled with ruthlessness and anger. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder. Although he had personally experienced the power of the treasure coin before, he had been struck by a bronze light. It was completely different from this silver light. Therefore, Lu Yi could not be sure what kind of power the treasure coin could unleash. He had already tried his best to overestimate the power of the treasure coin, but he had still underestimated it. He thought that the coin would only slow down the Moon Jade Star Beast a little. He didn't expect it to be able to bind the beast. Strictly speaking, it was not a binding but a mysterious seal. Lu Yi was not the only one who was shocked. Du Lang was dumbfounded and Li Shang was also dumbfounded. Under their astonished gazes, Lu Yi slowly walked up to the Moon Jade Star Beast. His entire body was practically standing in front of the beast's gaping maw. Du Lang was drenched in cold sweat. He touched the Moon Jade Star Beast in front of him, and he found that there was a piece of silver in his hand. It was very strange. Then he leaped up and landed on the Moon Jade Star Beast's back. He looked around and saw that the beast's back was covered in wounds. Some were big, some were small, some were deep, and some were shallow. However, because it had been several days since the previous battle with the Moon Jade Star Beast's physique, these wounds were already healing. Lu Yi found a relatively large wound and pulled out the Panshan saber. With the enhancement of the Divine Edge Spirit Mark, the Panshan saber's blade flashed with light. The saber cut 3 inches into the beast's flesh, and blood splattered everywhere. However, Lu Ye's hand went numb. A mid-stage Moon Jade Star Beast's physique was unimaginably strong. His saber had almost no effect. Stimulated by the saber strike, the Moon Jade Star Beast unleashed its full power. However, under the silver light seal it could not move at all. It could only unleash its full power. Other than making Lu Yi feel a little uncomfortable, it did not have much practical effect. Lu Ye's saber rose and fell, slashing again and again. After more than 100 consecutive slashes, the Moon Jade Star Beast's body was finally cut open, revealing its innards. The violent eruption of power made Lu Ye's entire body steaming. Blood gushed out of his body like a river. Du Lang watched in a daze. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have found it hard to believe that such a ridiculous thing could happen. A powerful Moon Jade Star Beast was sealed by some mysterious power, unable to move at all. Then it was hacked to death by a constellation. After a long time, the Moon Jade Star Beast's life force slowly dissipated. Its blood-red eyes were filled with anger and unwillingness. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.